Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto has fox features. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. The summer sun began to set, as Konoha was being painted orange as another beautiful day ended in the ninja village. The sound of people communing with one another in shops, restaurants and the streets filled the evening air. It was a day that for all intents and purposes was perfect. The heat of the day began to settle into pleasant warmth with a slight breeze that tickled the skin of those that called the village their home. To say the village was in its prime wasn't far off from reality. With the Sandaime Hokage still in power, they continued to enjoy the continued stabilization that came with his chair. They were 3 years removed from the devastation of the Uchiha massacre and were once again atop the elemental nations. A new alliance with Suna aided in that cause while maintaining its borders with Iwa and Kumo. Kiri had long since been an afterthought, still in the midst of civil unrest. To many, life couldn't get much better. But as it usually is, that is not always the case for everyone. Outside the gate, in the various training grounds that dotted the vast and thick forest of Hai no Kuni, a rhythmical thumping could be heard with the occasional grunt and groan. It wasn't uncommon for the various noises to be heard. After all, they were in a ninja village. It was a good sign for the sounds of training to be heard. But these sounds were not of youthful vigor or determined resolve. In an old rundown training ground that had all but been forgotten stood a young boy of 10 years old. His spiky blonde hair running wild, a perfect match for his deep blue eyes that shined when shown with his ever-present smile. 3 whisker marks adorned each cheek. He wore blue shorts and a once white t-shirt, permanently stained a dingy yellow from years of use, with a red swirl on the chest. He wore old, rotten sandals he had found in the dumpster. They were a bit big, but he wouldn't complain. Uzumaki Naruto just did what he always did. Make the best with what he had and pushed onwards with a smile on his face. Yet there was no smile today, not a trace of joy in his blue eyes or youthful energy in his posture. With every thrown kunai and shuriken, his shoulders slumped just a little more. With every deflected weapon that didn't embed itself in the target that was pinned to a tree trunk, his annoyance and frustration grew. Hours he had spent practicing throwing his weapons, but if one of the academy instructors were to come and watch, they would say he hadn't improved one bit. His hands shaking, Naruto reached for another kunai on the ground. He knelt down and grasped the handle before rising on wobbly legs. A sudden spasm wrecked his hand that grasped the knife. His knees hit the ground as the knife fell out of his hand. He lurched forward and barely caught himself with his hands extended in front of him. A feeling of nausea hit him. His head moved towards the ground as he began to dry heave, the non-existent contents of his stomach attempting an escape. His eyes watered as the pain racked his body. Had he had anything in his stomach, he would have no doubt been coating the forest floor in vomit. As it was, he hadn't eaten since yesterday, and he wouldn't be able to buy instant ramen for another 2 days when his measly monthly stipend came in. If he was lucky, he may be able to scrounge a meal from Ichiraku's ramen from the kind people who managed the shop. The racking of his body from dry heaving began to be replaced by the gasps of air as he began to sob, the emotional and physical strain he was feeling finally breaking the mask he painstakingly erected. The summer was always the worst for the poor boy. His loneliness that he felt only enhanced by the missed attention of his academy teachers. He would never admit it, but he loved going to the academy because it made him feel like he had friends, people that actually cared about him. His favorite moments spent with the few classmates that didn't openly despise him, but during the summer those few connections, as weak as they were, didn't exist. He clasped his hand into fists as his nails dug into the ground. His sobs began to die down before turning into a low growl. He brought his fists up above his head before screaming and hitting them on the ground. Why was he always treated like he didn't exist? Why did he always hear people calling him names like demon brat or monster behind his back when they thought he couldn't hear them? Why did all of the parents of the kids his age refuse him the chance to play with their children? Why wouldn't any shopkeeper ever treat him fairly? Why was he all alone? Why? He wasn't an idiot. He knew that his teachers weren't giving him the adequate lessons he should be getting. He knew he got the worst materials they had to offer, whether it be textbooks, kunai, ninja wire, you name it. He knew he was the dead last because his teachers continually undermarked him during their grading. He wasn't stupid, he just never got the chance. And that's all he ever wanted. A chance to feel like he belonged. Like people cared about him outside of the old man and the people at Ichiraku's. He wanted to be seen and not just ignored, to be heard rather than scoffed at and be called a nuisance or trash. He wanted to find a place in this world, yet whenever he tried he was met with same response, cold indifference. His body finally gave out on him as he finally collapsed onto the ground. His vision quickly caught the faint movement of a small orange creature before finally going black and passing out. Naruto groaned as a ray of sunlight danced across his face, waking him from his deep slumber. He sat himself up to find that again he was not sore. It was always a trait that confused him. No matter how hard he trained, he never once woke up the next morning sore. He shrugged it off and looked around his room before sighing and moving toward the bathroom. The Anbu, whoever the operative was, had taken him back to his apartment and set him on his bed after he had collapsed with all his kunai and shuriken gathered on his kitchen table. It wasn't the first time it had happened, and the last time he had seen it was a man wearing a dog mask with peculiar silver hair. Naruto's shoulders again dropped as he looked around his small apartment. The small apartment wasn't much, but it was home. The entryway led straight to a small kitchen and living area, empty ramen cups strewed across the floor. A small kitchen table with two rickety old chairs was in the middle of room with an old, beat-up couch that was under the window that gave a view of the Hokage monument and parts of the village. There was a single hallway with a door on either side, one to his bedroom and the other to the bathroom. What it lacked in size and new appliances, Naruto had tried to make up for in a sense of coziness. On the walls were posters from a few past Princess Gale movies along with a poster of his idol, the Yondaime Hokage, which he had found. On the window sill were a few potted plants that he took great care of for a boy his age. It wasn't much, but for Naruto it was home. If he could ask for anything else, it would be someone to greet him when he came home, a fantasy he often played out his head. He was woken from his thought as a small yawn came from his couch. He leaned his head out from the hallway with a curious look on his face. His eyes widened as he saw a small orange fox lying on the couch, curled into a ball. The little fox perked up as Naruto took a step forward. Naruto froze as he stared into the yellow, slitted eyes of the tiny creature. The fox had a beautiful orange coat with black paws and ears. Its predominantly orange tail was tipped with a black spot. Its underbelly was pure white that ran up to its chin and lower part of its head. The two stared at each other for what felt like hours before the corners of the fox's mouth turned slightly upwards in what looked like a grin as its tail began to dance playfully behind it. It gave a happy yip before jumping off the couch and scurrying to Naruto. It sat on its hind legs and peered up at the boy, all the while its tail swayed to and fro behind its body. Naruto slowly bent down, trying not to spook the little guy, although if one were to behold the spectacle they would say Naruto was the one that looked spooked. He stuck his hand out only for the fox to move its head backwards a bit, a motion Naruto mirrored. The fox cocked its head to the side before hesitantly moving forward, putting its head into the palm of the whiskered boy's hand. Naruto began to scratch the top of the curious creature and was responded with what sounded like a purr of content. Naruto's hesitant look was quickly replaced with a beaming smile. He moved his hand to underneath the fox's chin, continuing to scratch. The fox's only response was to extend its chin and its unusual grin to grow. It closed its eyes in pure ecstasy from the treatment it was getting. After a bit Naruto stopped and stood up, much to the little creature's annoyance. Naruto smiled down at the disgruntled orange animal. "Sorry little guy, but I have to take a shower." Naruto honestly thought he was in a dream and still on the forest floor. A cold shower to shock him out of his dreams, or if it really was his dreams then he might enjoy a hot one instead. Much to his surprise the water was biting cold. He quickly took his shower before jumping out and drying off. He opened the door and looked down to see the same fox sitting at his feet, its tail moving lazily behind it. Naruto just shook his head. How did a fox get in his apartment? He moved to the bedroom where he changed into the same shirt and shorts from yesterday. He didn't have many clothes, enough for 3 days' worth, so he usually reused clothes for a few weeks before going and washing them in a river somewhere. The room was beginning to heat up with the ever-rising temperature outside. To alleviate the issue he went to the window. He unlatched the window before lifting it up. He turned around when he heard a yip only to see the orange fox dash in front of him and jump out the window. Naruto gasped while trying to grab the fox, but he was too late. He looked out the window for his eyes to widen. At the base of the building sat the orange fox, who was peering up at him with a playful grin. It gave a yip and motioned with its head as if to say, "Follow me." Naruto paused for a minute before shaking his head and jumping off his couch. He stumbled across the room, where he quickly put his sandals on. He grabbed the keys to his apartment and tore out of the building. He came to a stop at the bottom of the stairs, panting heavily. He looked around before his eyes found the fox once again. The fox gave another yip before turning on its heels and running away. "Hey, wait for me," Naruto yelled before pursuing the orange animal. To Naruto's credit, he managed to stay within view of the orange animal as he ducked and dodged through various streets and alleyways. Naruto ducked and dodged various food carts, vendors and civilians as he chased the fox across the town, to the annoyance of those around. Finally, the fox seemed to be pleased with the street it was running across as they maintained their direction until they were outside the gates of Konoha. The little fox didn't slow down, and neither did Naruto as they began going deeper and deeper into the forests of Konoha. Naruto turned a corner and suddenly lost sight of his furry friend. Panting and gasping for breath, he hunched over and put his hand on his knees. He groaned as he thought about the potential friend he had lost before hearing the very recognizable yip of the fox. He looked up to see the fox poke his head out from behind a tree. With another yip and motion of its head, it vanished. Naruto muttered under his breath about foxes being stupid before grudgingly following the animal. He had gone this far, might as well finish what he started. He turned the corner of the tree and suddenly found himself in a small clearing. The sunlight bathed the beautiful clearing. Naruto looked around and noticed the various wild flowers that dotted the landscape, each in a different color that seemed to give the clearing a vibrancy of life he hadn't seen before. Naruto saw a familiar splash of orange. His eyes moved to his small fox friend before suddenly widening and moving upwards. In the very middle of the small clearing was a giant oak tree, its trunk, thick and sturdy, showing its long life while its limbs seemed to weave in and out of each other, creating a maze of wood dotted with beautiful, green leaves that seemed to shine as if coated with fresh morning dew in the sunlight. The presence of the tree was of warm age. Like a father staring down at his children, the tree promised protection, warmth and wisdom. Naruto finally let out the breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. His eyes moved from the large tree back down to his orange-clad companion, who wore a mischievous grin. Again the young fox tilted its head before walking to the base of the tree and vanishing. Naruto followed. As he approached, he noticed the roots of the trees came up from the ground and tangling, producing a small hole underneath. He heard the young fox's excited yip come from beneath. He lowered himself onto the ground and slid himself backwards into the hole. He was surprised when at first it couldn't feel a bottom. About halfway up his chest, his toes finally seemed to find hard ground just as the blades of grass he had been grasping onto broke. He landed on his back with a thud. He coughed and waved the dust away that arose from his encounter from gravity and picked himself up. He brushed his clothes off before suddenly freezing in place. He was standing perfectly straight? But how could that be? Finally he took a look around his environment and gasped at what he saw. He was standing in a large room, larger than what seemed to be the size of the tree. The walls were barely seen as shelves upon shelves of scrolls. Manuscripts and books filled them to the point that whoever had taken care of the place had to resort to placing scrolls in the corners of the room of the ground. The middle of the room was a circle of 5 chairs, each more extravagant, yet simple at the same time, than Naruto had ever seen before. In the middle of the chairs stood a small coffee table with a small statue of a fox in a crouch. Above was crystal chandelier that shone brightly and illuminated the room in a warm, bright light. A few desks lined the various shelves, each with their own chair and lamp. The floor of the room was clad in an intricate deep red carpet with various patterns that effortlessly flowed from one to the next as if they had been painted by a single brush stroke. Naruto had barely noticed this. What had truly caught his attention was the wall furthest from the entrance. Adorning the wall were weapons upon weapons, some of which Naruto had never seen. Katana, tanto, shuriken, kunai, quarterstaffs, pikes and many more lined the wall. Each made of the finest quality steel, fabric and materials that shone brightly with detailed engravings where steel was shown. But the best was in the middle of the wall. In the middle rested a platform with a stone table resting against the wall. On this table lay an orange scroll tied with a black cloth in the middle. The scroll was bigger than any Naruto had seen before. Above the scroll was the katana that truly caught Naruto's eye. The handle was pitch black, the cloth wrapped expertly starting at the silver tip of the handle and running to the hilt. The hilt was replaced with a silver depiction of a fox's head on either side, their mouths open. From their mouths came the blade, its metal shining brighter than any weapon on the wall. Black engravings danced from the fox's mouths as if they were spitting flames that died away a quarter of the way above the blade. Naruto felt his legs slowly carrying him to the platform on their own, his orange companion sitting happily beside the stone table of the platform. He couldn't describe it, the pull the scroll and the weapon had on him. It was like a faint voice calling to him, not a chilling voice, but a warm, soft voice like that of a mother. Finally he came to the table. He slowly moved his hands to grab the scroll, but stopped, as he was about to grab it. Hadn't he read something at the academy about enemy ninjas booby-trapping precious information or weapons? This was clearly important. Naruto was no idiot. He began to look over the scroll and table, careful not to disturb anything. He saw no signs of wires or explosive tags. He could find no evidence of holes in the walls or floors that could be used to release senbon or poisonous gas either. He heard a yip and looked down. His compatriot looked back up, a look of frustration and impatience adorning his features. His brows furrowed and head tilted as he looked up to Naruto. He gave a soft growl and yip as if to say, "Well, what are you waiting for?" Naruto reached back to the scroll and again paused before another yip shook him from the hesitation. He looked down and gave the fox a look of annoyance. Alright, I'm going. Don't rush me, you stupid fox," he said with a huff. He reached without hesitation and took hold of the scroll. He lifted it and was surprised that it took no physical strain at all to lift the large scroll. He took a better look at the scroll and could read the kanji for kitsune, spelled out the long way across the scroll. What is this? This is the summoning contract of the kitsune. Naruto screamed and proceeded to drop the scroll like it was on fire. He fell to the ground, landing on his butt, before quickly scurrying backwards, eyes never leaving the scroll. He felt his heart thump in his chest, attempting to break through his rib cage. The voice he heard was unlike anything he ever imagined. It was a deep, guttural sound, harsh with no sense of warmth. Something seemed unnatural about it, inhuman. Naruto shook his head. He darted up, his head snapping around the room looking for any other signs of life besides the little fox who was again looking at him with a face filled with confusion. "Who's there?" he stammered out. "That is of no concern," the voice responded. It seemed to reverberate around the room, but again Naruto could see nothing. "Like hell it is," Naruto exclaimed. "Where are you? Come out right now or else." His idle threats were met with a hearty laugh. Naruto's eyes strained to see any movements in the shadows of the room, but to no avail. "Or else what, kid? I have seen how you are. You couldn't scare a newborn baby deer," the voice said before laughing again. There was nothing pleasant about the laugh. Its very sound made the hairs across Naruto's body stand on edge. "Now go ahead and sign the contract already." "Why should I listen to you?" the blonde retorted. "Because, kid, I am far more knowledgeable than you will ever be. I have seen great shinobi rise and fall. I have seen empires vanish as fast as they were established. There is little that has escaped my senses," the voice answered. "Now sign the contract." "How do I know you won't trick me?" "Fool!" the voice roared like an animal on the hunt. "I am the one that has kept you safe from illness and injury. When your body is exhausted upon all its limits, I am the one that gives you energy. When sickness threatens to hinder you, I treat you and keep you healthy. I have done all this, so why then should you not listen to me now?" Naruto paused at this response. That would explain why he never was sick. Even when the rest of his class got the chicken pox last year, he seemed to be perfectly immune. He never was seriously injured, minus a few scrapes, but those always vanished the next day. Suddenly a thought ran through Naruto's mind and he grew defiant. "Bullshit. Excuse me? You heard me," Naruto stated. "I call bullshit." There was a pause before the voice finally responded with a new air of amusement in its sound. "And why is that, kid? If you truly cared about me, then you wouldn't have hid in the darkness all these years," he shouted, tears beginning to accumulate in his eyes. "I could have had someone by me when I was alone in my cold apartment on holiday nights, when I could see the lights of other houses where people enjoyed warmth and happiness. Me? I was always alone. If it's true that you have been seeing me and taking care of me, then you would have never let that happen to me in the first place. That is why I call bullshit. It is true. I could care less whether you live or die. I feel that way about all you humans. You are the wretch of the earth. The vile race that has destroyed the gifts Kami has given, and for what? Wealth, power and lust. All things that you enjoy for a few years before you die. If I had my way, the entire human race would have long since vanished. Then why help me? Naruto asked. Because you intrigue me, Kit. There has only been one human I have ever truly had respect and admiration for, the voice responded. With that said, over the years upon years since then I have not come across as a promising human as you, Kit. Understand, I still hate all humankind, but you I hate a little less. You have not earned my respect, Kit, but you intrigue me. Naruto chewed on the conversation up to this point, his mind wandering over the words before something finally caught his attention, a red flag of sorts. Wait, he began slowly, you've said you've lived a long time, outliving empires in fact. That means you have to be ancient. There was an indignant grunt at the mention of age. If that is true, then what are you? I've never heard of something that can live for that long. Do not worry about the minor details, Kit. Your kind worries too much about the details and fail to see the bigger picture. Too many wars and battles could have been avoided if you glorified monkeys, thought and talked less. For now, consider me your guardian angel. My guardian angel? Yes, and if you want answers you'll get them later. Now sign the damn contract. How do I do that? Naruto took the scroll back in his hands and examined it again. He had heard about summoning contracts in class, but it was said that different contracts were signed different ways. Some used weapons, others blood, and still others used seals. For the love of Kami, Kit. Naruto could hear mutterings from the voice. Finally there was an exasperated sigh. Open the contract and prick your fingers. Make sure there is a lot of blood. Sign the contract as it is shown by the others and then put the fingerprints of your right hand at the bottom. I swear, Kit, the human race gets dumber with every generation. Hey, I resent that. Naruto answered back. I'm only 10 and the academy barely went over summoning contracts, only saying the different types and that they were really powerful. They never actually taught us how to sign one. Whatever, Kit. Now sign the damn contract already. Once that is done, then I will leave the rest for the kitsune. I will see you later, Kit. In the meantime, just don't die. I haven't been this intrigued since a long time. With that, Naruto could tell the voice had vanished and he was alone again. Well, besides the small fox he had followed. Naruto looked to see the fox dancing around happily around the now opened scroll. Naruto sighed before biting on his thumb. He could taste the metallic flavor of his own blood. He looked at the very few names that were written on the other parts of the scroll. He began to write his name as the others had. Finally satisfied with the scribble he attempted to pass off as his name, he dotted the ends of his other fingers with the remaining blood and put the 5 points at the bottom of the scroll. He lifted his fingers and expected something, yet nothing happened. He looked around in confusion. The voice had made it seem like something or someone would appear, but that didn't seem to be the case. He was about to move the scroll back onto the table, thinking it was just a cruel prank, before a burst of smoke covered the scroll and him. Naruto coughed as he waved his hands in front of his face, his lungs burning from the smoke. It was worse than when he passed the clan compound of the chain-smoking Sarutobi. He always hated when the old man smoked in front of him, but he never really complained in fear of making one of the few people who treated him nice mad at him. The smoke cleared and Naruto began to rub his eyes in an attempt to get rid of the irritation. He could feel a few tears fall and brushed them off. He heard an excited yip and turned to the sound. When he opened his eyes, he found himself nose to snout with an abnormally large silver fox. The fox looked unimpressed, as it seemed to size up the young ninja in training. I told you I found someone that the scroll would accept, Naruto heard a happy voice of a wild-sounding boy say. He turned to see the same fox he had followed looking happily up at the duo. I knew he would pass Ka-chan, and since I found him, that makes me his personal summons. Naruto's only response was his jaw hitting the floor. He was shocked, speechless. The same damned fox he had followed could talk? Since when? What was this about being a personal summons and the fox calling this other fox? He didn't think it was a fox at all, its mother? Naruto could feel his brain overload and the smoke begin to billow out of his ears. If this was a prank, then it sure was a damned good one. He'd have to find the person responsible and ask them to teach him. He wanted his pranks to be this good. Silence, Ishiri, the silver fox said. Her voice was filled with power and superiority but at the same time had a warm and comforting tone. Naruto took another look at the imposing creature before him. He was only 10 but he could tell the vixen before him was larger than she should have been. She had to be close to 5 feet in length, if not longer. Her tail and paws matched her supposed child's but the rest was noticeably different. Her coat was a beautiful gray color and was accented by the darkness of the black fur on her snout and ears. Dark yellow eyes with black slits seemed to stare through Naruto. Naruto could feel every muscle in his body tense, his quads twitching, preparing to run as fast as he could but her eyes kept him rooted in place. The silver vixen began to pace slowly around the whiskered boy, her eyes never leaving him. Naruto stared straight ahead, taking a fascination with a speck on the wall. He noticed there was no patting sound, no swish of the tail. She moved silently, not a sound coming from her figure before finally plopping down on the ground in front of him. Breath, little one. Naruto gasped when he felt air come back into his lungs. He had been holding his breath for who knows how long. You show potential summoner. What? Naruto managed to squeak out. Speak up. The large fox barked as she looked down on the small boy in front of her. You are now the holder of the Kitsune clan contract. We do not speak so softly. Speak with pride. I'm what? Naruto stammered. You're my summoner now, the small orange fox yipped with happiness. That means you can summon me anytime you want, along with other members of clan if need be, but we won't need them. We'll go on missions and sneak through the Shaw. Enough, Ishiri. The larger silver fox cut off the small fox's ramblings. The large fox again turned her eyes to Naruto. A business-like aura began to come off of her. You are now the holder of the Kitsune clan contract, the summoner and lord of foxes. Your predecessors were known as lethal shinobi capable of bringing armies to their knees from the shadows. Their names spoken in hushed tones around campfires. Generations have passed since a summoner has walked this earth and now it is your turn to take up this mantle. Naruto sat in silence, stunned at hearing the words that were coming from the vixen's mouth. His mind racing, he could only come up with a single question. Why me? Because of who you are, the silver fox answered. Our last summer was an Uzumaki as were many before him. They were strong, their chakra alluring to us, and their willpower far exceeding those that claimed the rank of ninja. You make your ancestors proud for you embody those traits. My ancestors? Naruto felt his breath being taken away. He thought he came from an insignificant family, one that had no influence. In his wildest dreams he never thought that he would have a clan. I have a clan? Had young one, there was a hint of remorse in the fox's voice. They have long since been eradicated or dispersed among the nations. Their jutsus and abilities were seen as a threat that could be easily dealt with. Naruto sat on the ground feeling his legs begin to fail him. He felt his mind begin to short-circuit and he could almost feel the smoke pour out of his ears. He regrouped when he saw the concerned look on the smaller fox's face. So this was his personal summons? Would he grow as big as his mother? The large fox seemed to read his mind. Ishiri will grow as long as you do as well. Naruto gave the fox a confused look before continuing. His growth is determined on your bond. As your bond grows and you improve your skills, then so will he. You two will forever be intertwined, a bond to not be taken lightly. But I'm not a great ninja, Naruto answered. I can't even throw a kunai right. His look became even more dejected. You are still young, it is to be expected. The calm, nonchalant sound of the voice did little to encourage Naruto. You will grow stronger, of that we will ensure. We? Do you think that the Kitsune clan would not train their summoners? The vixen scoffed at the idea. No, you will be trained in the way of our clan, our ways. You will learn to work in the shadows, to walk among the enemy without raising even a hint of suspicion. Your clan's jutsus and many more will be at your disposal. Look around, she said as she gestured to the many shelves in the room. These are jutsus and other techniques written by our former summoners and other kitsune as they have gone through the world. Naruto's face-splitting grin returned with force as he looked around. All these scrolls are full of jutsus? Awesome. Naruto jumped to his feet and attempted to run to the nearest shelf only for a tail to stop him and ease him back in front of the vixen. Slow down, summoner, the fox said with an amused ring in her voice. You must learn to walk before you can run. They will be at your disposal in due time. For now your training will focus on the basics, chakra control, stealth and basic weaponry. That's no fun. This time it was Ishiri who voiced his disappointment. If we are going to a kick-ass combo then we have to learn the biggest and best jutsu possible. Naruto stood next to his new partner and voiced his agreement. The large vixen chuckled at the sight. You two were definitely made for each other. Both stubborn and as knuckle-headed as the other. She sighed when she saw the fake pouts the duo put on. They were going to be a handful. She could already feel the future headaches the new partners were going to create for her and her kinsman. If it is jutsu you want then I suggest you listen to your new senseis and work hard, especially on chakra control. Especially you Ishiri, yours is pitiful. No jutsu will work unless you have proper control. You sure that up, the both of you, and then you can begin jutsu training. Deal? The pair blinked their eyes before turning to the other. A small grin appeared on both their faces, an unheard conversation quickly taking place. They turned to the silver fox with smiles. Deal, they said in unison. Good, now I suggest that you both get a good night's sleep. You will need. I expect both of you to show up here at the same time tomorrow to begin your training, the large fox said. I will leave the rest of the day to you two to enjoy each other's company. Do not train, take today to relax and bond. Understood? Satisfied with the responses she smiled a more motherly smile at the two. Now that is settled, I will leave you two. Wait, what about this place? Naruto asked as he gestured to the large room at the base of the tree. Aren't you worried someone will come in here and steal everything? Of course not, summoner. The vixen brushed the question off as if it were obvious. The tree is hidden by genjutsu and seals keep those would-be intruders out. Consider this your sanctuary, summoner, but be warned. Do not bring outsiders here unless there is no choice. As you said, the Kitsune library is something coveted by ninja across the world. Before you go, what is your name? The large silver fox looked down on the young boy and smiled warmly at him. My name is Luna and it has been a pleasure to meet you, Naruto-chan. With that the fox vanished into a puff of smoke. Naruto smiled before looking down at the small orange fox below him. He was seated on his haunches and gazing up at him. Naruto knelt down and scratched the fox under the chin, eliciting the same response as before. We are gonna be the best duo anyone has ever seen, Ishiri managed to say between purrs of satisfaction. Believe it, Naruto lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Today had to have been the best in his entire young life. He had gained an awesome summons contract, but more importantly he gained a friend and a chance. He looked to the foot of the bed where Ishiri was curled up in an orange ball against his leg. He had to admit that the two seemed like the perfect pair. The young fox had bondless energy and seemed to be the mischievous type. They had managed to borrow some meat from one of the butchers in town. Naruto had distracted the butcher while Ishiri had snuck in the back and poached the prized meat before scurrying out unnoticed. They had laughed as they enjoyed the spoils of their little heist and recounted tales of other mischief they had come across in their early lives. Naruto had known the little guy for less than a day, but already he felt a bond as if they were brothers. He smiled. He finally felt the warmth of a true friend while curling up in his old bed at night instead of the pangs of loneliness. His thoughts turned a bit darker when he recounted the conversation he had with Luna and that strange voice. He would ask the large vixen about it next time he saw her. Right now he was more curious about the type of training he would be going through, the thought making him a little jittery. He peered back down when he heard a muttering from the sleeping orange fox. His life had certainly taken an interesting turn. Naruto held his breath. He examined the surrounding forest from his hiding spot. He had chosen a bush that rested in the middle of two large trees. The dead leaves covered the underside of the bush while low-hanging branches covered the top. His eyes shifted across the ground, looking for anything that might resemble his opponent. He took a deep breath in before exhaling in a sigh of relief. His relief was short-lived, however. A creak of a tree branch and a quick peek upwards caused Naruto to freeze. Above him was the toothy grin of a predator, one who loved the chase for the chase itself and the kill for the sheer pride in it. Naruto bounded out of his hiding place, taking off like a bat out of hell. The predator just smirked, giving his prey a fair head start before bounding off after him. Naruto ran across the forest floor before jumping into the trees and bounding from limb to limb. He could hear his pursuer's every footstep as it drew closer. His heart began to relentlessly pound in his chest. attempting to break free of his rib cages that acted as its prison. He continued on for a few minutes until the sound of footsteps could no longer be heard. He ducked behind the trunk of a tree and sat down to catch his breath. His heavy breathing echoed throughout the forest, but still he could not sense his pursuer. He let his guard down before a rustling in the leaves of a limb across from him again made him pause. His muscles froze, waiting for either fight or flight. His nerves were almost lost when a brown squirrel popped out of the foliage. Again Naruto sighed in relief before he broke into a smile and soft chuckle. The sound of laughter turned into a growl. His eyes went immediately to the same limb before his pursuer burst out of the foliage. Its teeth were showing a dazzling white and its claws were extended. In one leap it closed the gap between hunter and prey, violently placing a paw on the whiskered boy's chest, forcing him into the tree trunk. Naruto stared at his captor's yellow eyes, its bloodthirsty stare making him quiver under its gaze. The hot sensation of his breath mixed with the smell of previous prey made the boy's stomach want to lose the lunch he had eaten not even an hour ago. The snarling face turned to a smirk. "Better job, Naruto," the black fox said. The fox had a long, thin body. Not skinny by any means but that of a lean runner. It was pure black save for the tip of its paws, muzzle, ears and tail that were white as snow. There was also a white diamond in the middle of its forehead. You still have a ways to go before you master the art of stealth and hiding, but you have definitely improved. Would probably fool most shinobi but not a fox. You did better than Ishiri at least, the black fox said as he motioned to an adjacent tree branch. Naruto peered over and nearly fell from his perch laughing. Ishiri dangled from the scruff of his fur, limbs lying lazily in defeat, by the mouth of a white fox. The fox held the same features as the black fox that had chased Naruto down, except where his partner was black he was white and vice versa. The two brothers were the tracking specialists of the Kitsune clan. Shadow and Twilight were born trackers and hunters. From a young age they showed immense skill at following prey, picking up scents and hearing the most minute sounds that even the more experienced members of the clan couldn't even hope to pick up. While they were expert trackers and hunters, their lean forms were not adept at taking down bigger targets. Still, for anything that the clan needed to do with stealth while tracking something, the Yin-Yang brothers were always leading the way. The Gaki tried to hide using a pitiful genjutsu, Twilight said as he spat out Ishiri onto the branch next to Naruto. It was actually quite insulting to think that we wouldn't see through such a pathetic ruse. Hey, it worked on Naruto. Ishiri spat back at the slight to his technique. That's because Naruto can't tell the difference between a genjutsu and his own asshole. This time it was Shadow who spoke up. Hey, I'm getting better. It was Naruto's turn to take offense to the slight against his skills. Besides, it isn't like I have ever seen one. The academy has only gone over the theoretical aspects of genjutsu. Actually forming one isn't taught until this year. That is why we have decided to teach you, Naruto. The powerful voice came from below them. The group of four looked down to see Luna sitting on her haunches looking up into the trees. Come down here, you four. There is much to discuss. The group descended to the bottom of the large tree they had been perched on. Once the four were down and had settled in front of the matriarch, she began again. I was not watching for long, but it seemed to me that you have improved in hiding and tracking using sound. Would you say that is accurate, Shadow? Shadow eyed Naruto before looking at his brother. The two trackers held a silent conversation before turning back to the large silver vixen before them. Yes, while he has shown great skill in using the terrain to hide, he has yet to fully master the art of covering his tracks. The low-ranking ninja probably would not have noticed the slight changes to the surrounding areas, but he still needs to improve. He has yet to be able to sniff out targets or pursuers, and he cannot yet mask his scent, though that isn't surprising. I am pleased to say, however, that he has shown some improvement in hearing for changes in the environment, he said with a sound of pride in his voice that was matched by his brother's posture. It seems the chakra exercises that Ari-sama had him start are working well. Good, and how about Ishiri? Luna asked Twilight. Showing small improvement, although he is getting overconfident in his abilities, Twilight said, much to the matriarch's disappointment. The larger fox looked at her child with narrowed eyes. You don't say, Twilight, she said with a small snarl. Maybe we should talk to Bruno about beating that out of him. Ishiri and Naruto's eyes widened at the prospect. The fear of being put under even more physical exercises than they already endured on a daily basis made them pale. Of their teachers, Bruno was easily their least favorite. Their muscles still ached from the first day they were introduced over a week ago. Naruto and Ishiri awoke at the crack of dawn as ordered, the alarm clock greeting them to a new day. Naruto threw his hand at the offending timepiece several times before finally finding the button to turn it off. He shifted his body so his feet now dangled off the bed. He turned his head when he heard a rather long yawn. Ishiri uncurled himself from his peaceful sleeping position. He stretched out, front paws out in front of his head and butt in the air before lunging forward. He turned to Naruto with bloodshot eyes as he tried to wet his dry tongue. Both boys were not, by any means, morning people. Naruto stretched before finally getting out of bed and shuffling off into the kitchen. He opened the fridge and looked at what he had. He reached for a half-empty carton of milk. He opened the flaps of the carton and took a whiff of the contents. Not completely disgusted with the smell, he took a quick swig of the milk before taking a bowl and pouring some for Ishiri. He put the bowl on the ground before finishing off the rest. Ishiri stumbled out of the bedroom and gave a grunt as Naruto passed him and headed into the bathroom. He was expecting some meat and eggs or something to be ready on the table. He was shocked and a little peeved when all he came across was a bowl of milk sitting on the ground next to the kitchen table. "Oi Naruto, what do you take me for? A house cat?" he shouted, still peering down at the bowl of milk with irritation. "Huh? Did you say something, Ishiri?" Naruto asked as he peered out from the bathroom with a toothbrush in his mouth. "Do you think I am some sort of house cat?" Ishiri asked with the same inflection of annoyance. "I want meat for breakfast, not just milk. How are we supposed to be ready for our first day of training with just milk?" Naruto spit out the contents of his mouth and walked into the kitchen. "Sorry, but that is all I had," he said with a shrug. "I have done with worse. Sometimes I don't even have milk for breakfast. This is the best I could do." Ishiri looked down at his breakfast with disappointed. "Well, it's something, I guess." He bent down and licked at the drink. "Yeah, we're going to have to teach you hunting or something so we can actually eat." "I wouldn't be opposed to that," Naruto said from his bedroom where he was placing his ninja gear in his backpack. After the early morning days had managed to wear off, he was excited as ever to get back to training, and this time he had a friend to train with. "Hey Ishiri, what do you think your mom wants us to bring?" "Beats me, Naruto, but don't you think we should get going by now?" "Yeah, let's get going," Naruto shouted as he raced out his front door. "Race you there." And just like that, the new duo was sprinting through the empty early morning streets of Konoha, laughing the entire way as they tried to beat the other out. They didn't stop until they were just outside of the tree that Naruto had been taken to yesterday. When they entered, a cough cut off their laughter. They looked up to see the 5 chairs in the middle of the large library to be taken by 5 rather large foxes, with Luna sitting in the largest of them. "Good of you two to finally join us," she said, looking at them with narrowed eyes. "Now Naruto, come here, I would like to introduce you to a few of my kinsmen." Naruto walked up next to her and gazed at the 4 sets of eyes that were thoroughly locked onto him. "Naruto, this is the elder council of the Kitsune clan. They have asked to meet you today." "You were right, Luna. He is a peculiar one, isn't he?" a sweet womanly voice said before giggling. Naruto's eyes moved to a vixen that had a silver pelt with a slight blue color in her fur. Her tail, which was dancing behind her happily, was more blue with a black tip. She gave off an aura of happiness that was reflected in her yellow eyes with a black, vertical slit in the middle. "He looks rather scrawny if you ask me," came a gruff, raspy voice. The owner of the voice was a large orange fox. The principal mark of this fox was the scar on its left eye that was matched with other scars that were scattered throughout his burly body. He gazed at the summoner with green, glassy eyes that looked as if he was going slightly blind. "Naruto, this is Ari and Bruno," Luna began, motioning to the 2 foxes that had spoken up. "They will be instructing you in many aspects a ninja must be competent in. Ari will be teaching you chakra control and genjutsu, while Bruno will be taking over your physical development and taijutsu training." "Thank you, Ari-sensei, Bruno-sensei," Naruto said with a slight bow. He knew about manners, though he chose to often ignore them. But in this case he decided to be more careful in his dealings with the 2 elder foxes. "Oh, and he is polite and cute too," Ari said before again giggling. "Yes, well anyways," Luna said as she looked at the blue fox with confusion. Naruto, these will be your teachers in politics and fuinjutsu, Luna said, motioning to the last two elders. This is Yasu. The fox in question was a small orange fox not much larger than Naruto himself, and he will be your political teacher. Naruto figured he was on the smaller side of the Kitsune clan members if he was comparing him to the others, minus Ishiri, that were in the room. And last but not least is Suzuki, who will be your fuinjutsu instructor. The fox in question had a whiter form with a worn brown fur that matched his dull, yellow eyes. Nothing was significant about this fox except it looked as if he had let himself go in his advancing years. Both foxes gave a respectful nod, which Naruto returned in kind. But what about ninjutsu, Luna-sama? Naruto asked with a hint of disappointment. I will see to personally to that, Naruto-chan, she said with a smile. Now if we don't have any more questions, I belly. Ka-chan? Ishiri spoke up sheepishly. Luna narrowed her eyes at her young kid. Yes, Ishiri? Well, I was wondering if we could first learn hunting. Hunting? Don't you think that is getting ahead of yourself, young kid? Bruno asked with a small amount of indignation in his voice. Yes, Ishiri. Luna began with a bit of confusion. Normally that would be saved for after chakra control and genjutsu. What would make you think we would push it forward for you too? Well, so we can eat, Ishiri said. What little confidence he had going into the question had quickly diminished. I don't understand, shouldn't Naruto have food at his place? Luna, and the rest of the council, looked at Naruto with a curious gaze. Naruto lowered his gaze and put a hand behind his head. He chuckled with a sheepish smile. Well, you see, the people in Konoha don't exactly like me. They jack up prices to the point I run out money and food before I can get more money. The council gave the blonde boy a look of shock. Despicable, Aries' jovial voice was replaced with a growl. Yes, quite shameful indeed, Yasu stated. Heads would be rolling if the Uzumaki had heard of this happening to one of their own, Bruno stated with a snarl in his own. Luna looked at the boy's features in a new light. She had wrote off the lack of muscle to a lack of physical exercises like push-ups, but that seemed to no longer be the case. Yes, that is quite a problem you have there, Naruto. She again thought of the issue for a moment. She couldn't just let her son and the new summoner of her clan go hungry. Very well, we will introduce you two to the Yin-Yang brothers today, and until then we will provide enough to get you two through training. Anyone opposed to this? A quick look around the council showed that there were no objections to the amended plans. Very well, in the mornings you will be with Bruno. After lunch then Ari will be training you in basic chakra control, followed by a few hours with the Yin-Yang brothers. Bruno, they are all yours. With that the other four foxes vanished in a puff of smoke. The smoke cleared to show Bruno with a corner of his lips turned upwards. The young Kitsune and summoner each gulped at the look they were given. Again, Bruno shouted from a perch where he sat, looking down at the two trainees as they made yet another lap of the course he had mapped out earlier in the day. The course included tree climbing, jumping from limb to limb, and flat sprinting around the clearing that held the Kitsune library. The course was about a mile in circumference, which would normally not tire out the two exuberant youth, but by the 50th lap both were feeling their limits. Naruto picked himself up off the ground and started another lap. Ishiri moaned as every muscle from his tail to muzzle ached, yet he too picked himself up and continued to move on. In his tired state, Naruto undershot a tree branch he had been jumping for. He frantically grasped for the limb, but to no avail. He hit the forest floor with a thud. He looked up when he heard snickering to see Bruno lying on a perch above him, his head resting on his paws. Enjoying the view from up there? Naruto yelled up. Seems to be more comfortable than down there, wouldn't you say? He teased back. I would get up if I were you, or I may just tack on another lap. Bruno barely finished his sentence before Naruto took off, the ground blazing behind him. Bruno threw his head back and hollered in amusement. Naruto would have taken the added laps as opposed to what faced him and Ishiri following their romp through the forest. Push-ups, pull-ups, sit-up and squats were among the short list of various exercises that Bruno made the pairing endure. Among Bruno's favorite was an exercise where he would attach a sled to one of them. He would sit on the sled and make the trainees sprint as fast as they could while the other held a position meant to strengthen their core. Good, I guess you two have earned a lunch break, Bruno said, now fully amused by the two. With an exclamation of relief, the pair fell down and nearly passed out. Their bodies were beyond sore, their muscles pleading for a respite and their lungs begging for air. Hey you crazy, senile old fox, Naruto managed in between gasps for air. I thought you were supposed to teach us taijutsu. PSH, Bruno scoffed at the comment. Taijutsu would be useless unless the body is at top physical condition. You two have to lose a lot of body fat and gain a lot of muscle before taijutsu becomes even remotely useful to you beyond making your opponents piss themselves with laughter. So when will we actually begin our training? Ishiri rose his head up to view the older, veteran fox. Until you two show enough physical advancement, then this will be your training, Bruno said while jumping from his perch in a nearby tree. But it seems we need to focus more on muscle than stamina. I am impressed, Naruto. A smile made its way across Naruto's lips, earning a snarl from the instructor. Don't get used to the compliments, kid. You are still as weak as a newborn baby deer. Now eat up before Ari shows up. She doesn't like to be kept waiting. With that, the large fox vanished in a puff of smoke. In his place now sat a meal of nuts, berries and rabbit, cooked for Naruto and raw for Ishiri, lying on piece of cloth. The pair drooled at the plethora of food as their stomachs serenaded the surrounding forest with their cries of hunger. They practically leapt at the food only for them to pass right through it. Colliding into a tree, the pair groaned from their new spot on the ground. A beautiful laugh could be heard echoing throughout the forest. Turning to their left stood the large, blue fox, a tail attempting to cover her laughter. Upon seeing the two had seen her, the vixen cleared her throat and began. This is a basic genjutsu used in hunting. Using this technique allows the hunter to turn a trap into an enticing meal or clearing for its prey. Lucky for you two, it wasn't hiding anything. The blue fox noticed the look of dejection on the face of the trainees before again chuckling. Don't worry, I actually have food for you. I just wanted to see how you dealt with a genjutsu, she said as she stepped sideways to show the same plethora of food behind her. With a look of suspicion, the two approached the food. Ishiri leaned into the piece of raw meat, sniffing it to see if it wasn't something else, earning a laugh from the vixen. Ishiri's eyes lit up before jumping onto the piece of meat and ripping into his meal. Seeing that this was indeed the real meal, Naruto quickly joined him. The pair tore through the meal and in moments were lying on their backs with protruding bellies. A belch of appreciation came from the small fox and a groan from the whiskered boy. You two happy now? Ari asked the two, getting slow nods in response. Good. Her voice suddenly turned from jovial to serious. Now get up, we have a lot of work to do and not a lot of time. At the tone of the voice, the pair shot up. The vixen's tail was no longer swaying behind her body playfully but instead stood ramrod straight. I will be teaching you the basics of genjutsu. How to mold your chakra into different illusions that will be used to keep yourself hidden or immobilizing a force larger than yourself, allowing you to either kill them or get away. To do this you must have excellent chakra control. Now, young summoner, what can you tell me of chakra? Naruto put a hand to his chin as he thought back to his previous year at the academy. It was at the end of this last year they had begun to mold chakra into jutsu, so he was fairly new at it. He put his hand to the back of his head and chuckled. Well, it's used to make awesome jutsu. Everyone knows that, Naruto began, thoroughly underimpressing his teacher. Oh, and people don't have the same amount. Some have more than others. An annoyed sigh came from the blue vixen. This is going to take a while, she muttered under her breath while lowering her head and covering her eyes with a paw. She shook her head and looked up at the blonde boy and the small fox, who looked embarrassed by his partner's answer. It's usual to see the kitsune farther along than their summoner, but this is bad. You are both correct and incomplete, Naruto. Chakra is the combination of both physical and mental energy. The physical energy comes from the various cells in your body and can be increased with exercise and training, something even Bruno Baka can be helpful with. The other half, the mental energy, is gained through meditation and overall mental strength, something you apparently have in spades, young kid. Now these two energies are connected and brought together in finely tuned coils known as a person's chakra pathways. Similar to the veins that carry blood to your limbs, the chakra pathways carry chakra throughout your body, expelling the energy in the form of jutsu or powerful bursts of chakra. Chakra can be used to heal, strengthen one's limbs, increasing power and speed, and mold it into jutsu, as you have stated previously. Chakra, above all else, is what keeps you breathing. Without it you will die, so controlling it is key if you are to not overexert yourself in battle more than you need to. Understand, Naruto-chan? Smoke began to billow out of Naruto's ears as he began to slowly process the information. He felt as if he had just been put through a week of lecture notes in 5 minutes. Ari saw the confused look and again sighed. By being able to mold chakra more effectively, you will be able to not only preform jutsu but also make yourself stronger and faster. Does that make sense? A violent nod, accompanied by a smile that made her squint, followed the dumbed-down version she gave the Uzumaki. Now Ishiri will demonstrate our first training technique. With a happy yip, the orange fox pranced over to a group of leaves that were on the ground near the trio. He grabbed a few with his mouth, spitting them on the ground in front of Naruto and Ari. He managed to get a leaf in his paw and place it on his forehead. Naruto looked on curiously as the underside of the leaf began to glow blue. Ishiri closed a single and stuck out his tongue as he managed to get the leaf to stick to his head before it slid off onto the ground. "I don't get it," Naruto muttered, still staring at the leaf on the ground. Ishiri focused his chakra into a point on his forehead and held the leaf there but didn't add enough so it fell off. Ari answered the confused look. But he didn't make a seal. How could he mold chakra without a hand seal? "Our tails act as your hands do, Naruto," Ari answered. "When we focus our chakra with specific movements or poses of our tail, we can mold our chakra into jutsu." Ari demonstrated the ability. With a few flicks of her tail, she sent a small flame from her mouth. Naruto's jaw dropped when the flame turned into a small fox, the size of Ishiri. "Show off," Ishiri muttered. "Now Naruto, take a leaf and place it on your own forehead," Ari commanded. "Use the ram seal and focus your chakra to the point where the leaf is on your forehead." Naruto nodded as he picked up a leaf and placed it on his forehead. He used the appropriate hand sign before closing his eyes and concentrating as hard as he could. He could feel the chakra begin to mold but still pushed harder. Ishiri and Ari's eyes widened as Naruto suddenly became enveloped in twisting blue chakra. The wind whipped up by the energy made their fur fly around. Suddenly Ari ducked as the leaf rocketed off the young boy's forehead. Ishiri and Ari watched as the leaf sliced a path through the forest before embedding itself in a tree 30 yards away. Ari felt something off about her tail. She brought it before her eyes to see the tip of fur that was normally there had been cut clean off. "Well, that is interesting." Naruto opened his eyes to see Ishiri staring up at him in astonishment. "That was awesome," Ishiri shouted as he began to jump up and down. "How did you that?" Naruto put a hand behind his head as he smiled sheepishly. "I don't know, just did." Ari, still staring at her tail, spoke up. "Naruto-chan, have you learned any jutsu at your academy? Shouldn't you have learned one or two?" Naruto had a dejected look as he nodded his head. "Yeah, we were supposed to try to make these clones, but mine never came out right. I can't even make one that stays standing for more than a second, and that is with wind keeping it standing." "Just as I thought. He has more chakra than the average boy his age. Quite interesting." Ari realized she had spaced out when she found her two young charges staring at her. She giggled before looking at Naruto. "Very good, now try a little less chakra this time, Naruto-chan." "Hi Ari-sensei," Naruto said before starting the drill over. Ari looked on with a satisfied swish in her tail as the young duo continued. After about 2 hours of the training, Ishiri finally fell on the ground exhausted. Ari giggled as the small fox was panting, fur in a mess, watching Naruto again send a leaf cascading into a tree, this time only 10 yards away. "I think that is enough for today, you two." Ari's voice returned to its usual playfulness when she talked to them. "Take a break before your next instructors arrive." With that, she trotted into the large tree that housed the Kitsune library. When she entered, she found the other 4 elders waiting for her. She walked to her chair before climbing into it. She got comfy before looking at Luna to start the meeting. "So your assessment on Naruto-chan is what exactly?" Luna asked, eyeing Bruno and Ari. Bruno was the first one to answer. He cleared his throat as his eyes danced around the circle. "Naruto's malnutrition has done damage to his body, stunted his growth and muscle improvement. When he gets a more balanced diet, he will show drastic changes in his strength and speed. With that said, his stamina is second to none. I haven't seen anyone since the Uzumakis that could go as long as him. Even Ishiri could barely keep up, and that kid is known for his unending supply of energy." Luna nodded as she began to put the information away for later thinking. She looked over to Ari, who had her brows scrunched together in thought. "And you, Ari-san? What have you found?" Huh? Ari was broken out of her thoughts. Oh yes, well, he is definitely interesting. He shows great work ethic, but I think he is fighting an uphill battle. A concerned look made its way onto all the faces around the circle as they eyed her. What do you mean by that? Yasu asked the question everyone was thinking. Ari shrugged as she thought through her answer. Well, simply put, he has too much chakra, at least for a boy his age. He struggles to control it and doesn't realize, I think, just how much he is putting into his exercises. He showed me a clone jutsu and it was rough. Any way to fix this? Luna questioned. More and more practice really, Ari answered. I think if we give him the gifts of the kitsune, that might be able to help him. If he could focus the right amount of chakra into his ears, eyes or nose, then he might be able to figure out how much chakra is appropriate. Are not the Yin-Yang brothers going to present this gift to him today? Yasu again questioned. Yes, that should be happening right about. The screams of the two young trainees echoed throughout the room. Now. A smile danced across Luna's face. Naruto and Ishiri were lying on the ground staring at the canopy of leaves above. Hey Ishiri, how long have you been training? Naruto asked. Ishiri took a deep breath in before turning his eyes to his partner. For about a year or so. I was supposed to be taught with the other foxes my age, but I just got bored. So I went out one day and came across Konoha. That is when I smelled you. You smelled me? Well, your chakra really. I got excited and went back to the den, but I got ridiculed. Said I couldn't have found a new summoner. I was shunned more than normally. I hated it, Ishiri said with a frown. You were shunned? Naruto asked with a frown. I was the runt of the litter. I have a brother and sister who were in my litter and I am the youngest plus the smallest fox my age, Ishiri answered. I got bullied a lot, so I tried to get attention from everyone that wasn't my mom. That's why I ran away. Then I found you and thought things would change, but it just got worse. That is why I was so excited when I got the chance to prove myself to those that said I wouldn't do anything worthwhile. Naruto smiled as he looked back up to the trees above. He felt connected, really connected, to his partner. He felt for the first time that he actually had a friend. Naruto caught a quick shift in Ishiri's movements. What's wrong? He asked the young fox. Did you hear something? He asked as he got up and began to sniff the air around them. No, I didn't, Naruto answered back. He pulled himself off the ground and walked over to where Ishiri was sniffing about. Hey, did you see Naruto was cut off as suddenly teeth and claws appeared from the bushes. Naruto and Ishiri screamed as they were sent flying backwards and were faced with pearly white teeth and razor-sharp claws pinned at their throats. They felt the hard bark poke their backs, but they were more focused on the piercing yellow eyes that stared through them. Rule number 1. When on the hunt, never let your guard down, the black fox answered, who had his paw on Naruto's chest and claw at his throat. Rule number 2. If you hear something and go to investigate, be armed and ready to fight, the white fox, who had Ishiri pinned underneath his paw and teeth inches away from his muzzle, growled out. Who are you? Naruto stammered. We are the Yin-Yang brothers, the black fox said with pride in its voice. I am Shadow and this is my brother Twilight, he said, motioning with his muzzle to the snow-white fox over Ishiri. And this is a waste of our time, the white fox spat. We were told we would be training the new summoner and his partner Natagaki and a pup who looks like he mastered potty training yesterday. Twilight, hold your tongue, Shadow barked back. And why should I? This is a complete waste of our talents. The boy can't even mold his chakra to use the traits he has been given. Our mission is to train them to hunt and track for the next 2 months until the boy returns to his own academy, Shadow started. Remember last time we disobeyed orders? The white fox gave a low growl. Yeah, Luna-sama had us babysitting the pregnant vixens. I am still feeling the bite left when Uri thought I was on the menu, that bloated whale. I would warn against insulting my niece Twilight, a voice came from behind the group. Standing behind them were the 5 elders, Luna and Ari, looking especially pissed. Maybe next time we'll put you on nursing duties and before you say you can't we will find a way. Shadow and Twilight both gulped at the threat that sounded more like a promise. Now if you two are done complaining, I think we should begin with some introductions. As you know, this is my son, since you have chased him around before, and this is our new summoner, Uzumaki Naruto. Both sets of ears perked up at hearing the surname. Shadow began to look over the boy, but it was Twilight who spoke up. This boy shows no signs of being an Uzumaki. Look at him, blonde hair, blue eyes, Nothing that would signify him being an Uzumaki. I can assure you his chakra matches those of the Uzumaki to the letter, Twilight, Luna said, becoming annoyed. But you have not been called here to question the council's actions and rulings, you have been called here to instruct, and instruct you will. Is that clear? Hi Luna-sama, we will do as you have commanded, Shadow answered before Twilight could open his muzzle. What would you like us to teach him? Basic hunting abilities from hiding to trap setting and finally tracking. We would also like you train him in the traits he has been given since signing the contract. A warning to be careful with his training, Ari spoke up. He possesses vast amounts of chakra, so his use of the traits should not be used unsupervised until stated otherwise. Understood? Hi, both brothers said in a militaristic manner. Wait, what traits? Naruto asked. I'm not gonna grow fox ears or a tail, am I? No summoner. The traits you have been given are similar to a Kekkei Genkai, Luna answered. A what? You know, like the Hyuga and their Byakugan, Ishiri interrupted. You mean those people with white eyes? Naruto asked. Precisely, young one. Your new traits cannot be passed down through heritage, however, because they only belong to those who signed the Kitsune contract, Luna said. These traits include enhanced eyesight to see further and distinguish different colors that are the same to the unaided eye, as well as the ability to see better in the dark. Next is hearing in order to hunt without sight while hearing for enemies, and smell to track across long distances that would make those mutts in the Inuzuka clan green with envy. Wow, that is so cool. Naruto shouted. When can we start? We start now, Kit, Shadow said with a smile. He liked the boy's enthusiasm, although he could tell Twilight would be reluctant to help out. We'll begin with basic trap setting. I told you this was a waste of time, Twilight said as Naruto bobbed up and down from a rope that was tied one side to a limb and the other to his foot. If he gets caught in his own traps, then he will be useless as a hunter and as a shinobi. Pathetic. I almost had that rabbit, Naruto shouted. He was right too. The rabbit had almost stepped on the rope that would have tied around its foot, and instead of Naruto dangling upside down, it would have been the rabbit. Yeah, until you shouted in victory with whatever stupid saying that was, Twilight retorted back. Rule number 3. You will have plenty of time to celebrate a successful hunt over dinner. It is Datbeo, and I say it when I get excited, Datbeo. Naruto shouted with a red face. Blood was beginning to rush to his head. Will you two be quiet? Shadow said as he walked through a bush with Ishiri, who held the same rabbit in his mouth that had come close to falling into Naruto's trap. If you two make any more noise, you could wake the dead, let alone scare away any more potential prey. Besides, it is pointless. Naruto's little outburst led the rabbit right to Ishiri. I call that teamwork and success. Twilight scoffed. More like dump luck. Hey, better lucky than good sometimes, Shadow said with a smirk on his face. Isn't that how you got that buck last year? Hey, that was all skill. Twilight shouted back. Yeah, on the part of a den of wolves. They tracked him and pushed him right to you. All you had to do was grab it and shoot some flames to get those overgrown poodles to back off, Shadow stated with a grin. The group laughed at the white fox as it pouted at being made fun of before returning to the day's lesson on trap setting. By the time the duo entered Naruto's apartment, they had 4 rabbits and a couple of fish that would be a good dinner and breakfast for the 2 trainees. Naruto stood before his 4 teachers, each with a beaming smile on their face. Even Twilight had one, with Luna standing in the middle. Sitting next to him was his partner Ishiri. It had been a wild 2 months for the pair. The once weak and frail blonde-haired boy had begun to grow muscle and even hit a small growth spurt, much to his enjoyment. Ishiri's sleek physique was also beginning to fill in with added muscle, but to his annoyance had yet to hit a growth spurt like his partner. You two have shown remarkable improvement along the course of just 2 months, Luna said with a purr in her voice. We are all very proud of you. Now, Naruto, don't think that just because the academy is beginning another year that you are getting off easy. You will continue your studies in the evening after you let of school. Be sure to work hard like we were teaching you. Hi Luna-sama, Naruto said with a bright smile on his face. We have a gift for you, Naruto-chan, Ari spoke up. She saw a disgruntled look on Luna's face but continued. What? I couldn't wait anymore. Ari went behind a bush and brought back in her mouth a long black-sleeved, skin-tight shirt along with a normal white shirt with a black Uzumaki symbol on the front and the yin-yang symbol on the back. Mr. Softy over there thought you'd like it, she said, pointing to Shadow. Hey, we just wanted everyone to know who is teaching the boy, Shadow said with pride in his voice. It is more for our own egos than anything. Young fools, Bruno muttered before looking up at the duo. Makes us proud boys and remember Naruto, what is the most important part of fighting? Control the pace and wait for your chance to strike. Bruno gave the boy a nod of approval at the answer. Good luck Naruto, Luna said before the party vanished in a puff of smoke leaving the whiskered boy and Orange Fox alone. They made their way back into Konoha with Ishiri hiding in Naruto's backpack. They sat down for dinner. They stayed up late and talked about the exciting things they had done and learned since meeting each other before slipping off into blissful sleep. Naruto stood in front of the academy building. He took a gulp before walking in. He was both excited and disappointed. He was excited because he wanted to show off what he had learned in his time with the Kitsune clan, but he was more disappointed he would be returning to the academy. He had felt like he had teachers who cared about him, even Twilight, but now he was going to be entering a place he knew he would be by himself. What made him feel really lonely was the fact Ishiri wouldn't be with him. The clan had made a decision to keep his status as a summoner secret until he could better defend himself. Maybe Shikamaru, Choji or Kiba would hang out with him, but that was fairly rare. With a sigh of defeat, he pushed open the doors of the academy and made his way to the third floor where the upperclassmen met for classes. He searched for his classroom and opened the door. What greeted him was an astonished look from a Chunin. The Chunin wore the standard shinobi garb of Konoha with his headband worn as a cap rather than the normal wear. His silver hair fell below his chin. The Chunin's gaze turned from surprise to slight scorn. Naruto brushed it off as he made his way to his normal spot in the back of the class in a corner. Naruto put his head down, attempting to catch up on a few minutes of lost sleep from nerves before he was awakened by the door opening harshly. Sorry I'm late Mizuki. I got caught up with printing copies to hand out to our students. The newest addition to the room took a look around upon seeing Mizuki's face. His eyes brightened up when he saw the blonde boy sitting in the corner. Naruto matched the Chunin's smile when he saw possibly the only instructor at the academy who would teach him, staring back at him. He looked up to Amino Iruka for his kindness. He'll never forget the day he met the man who he wished had been his instructor since day one at the academy. Naruto fell to his butt with a thud. He got up onto shaking legs before again striking the pillar in front of him. He had been at the academy grounds since school had been let out. He was there training because he had again been embarrassed in taijutsu sparring, and still he had gotten no help from his instructors. So he trained on his own. He figured that eventually his hard work would make up for the lack of teaching, but he grew more and more frustrated with each loss. He let out a cry of exhaustion as he fell forward, the training pillar catching him. He leaned against the object, trying to push himself up before his legs finally gave out and he again found himself on the ground. Between his gasps for breath, he heard footsteps approaching. He opened a single eye to see a Chunin instructor of the upperclassmen walk from around the building. He looked like an average ninja of Konoha, textbook in his uniform. The only aspects that stood out was his brown hair that was done up in a short ponytail that stuck straight up, accompanied by a scar that ran across the bridge of his nose. Naruto looked into his black eyes expecting to see hatred, but instead saw kindness. What are you doing out here so late? The Chunin asked as he approached the blonde-haired boy. The academy grounds have been closed for an hour. Naruto stared at the ground, not wanting to see the answer in the Chunin's eyes when he asked his own question. I snuck back in. I lost today during our spars and I just wanted to practice. None of the teachers ever told me what I did wrong, so I am out here working hard so next time I win. Naruto explained through his heavy breathing. Please, can I stay for just a few minutes longer? Iruka looked down on the young ninja to be with pity. He had seen the grades of the lower level classes. He was disappointed in his fellow instructors for their actions, or rather lack of actions. He hummed while he placed his hand under his chin, pretending to be thinking. How about I do you one better? How about we walk through the basic academy Kata, he suggested. He smiled when he saw exuberance being painted on the young boy's face. That would be awesome. Please sensei, Naruto yelled. The pair worked for another hour, Iruka frustratingly fixing mistakes that should have been dealt with early in Naruto's basic form and Naruto soaking up every bit of information he could. Finally Naruto couldn't stand any longer and fell to the ground exhausted. That is good work Naruto, Iruka beamed down at the sweaty, whiskered boy. You really improved today. Go home and get some food before you go to bed. Iruka paused when he saw the look of dejection on the 9-year-old's face. What is wrong, Naruto? I don't have any money to get dinner and I ran out of instant ramen last night, Naruto said as his stomach rumbled at the mention of food. Iruka, again, looked on the boy with pity. He had grown up the same way, without parents who had been taken from him by the Kyuubi attack, but never once did he blame Naruto for his struggles. In a way it made him who he was. Well, how about, for your hard work, I treat you to a nice, big, hot bowl of ramen from Ichiraku's. He laughed when he was met with shouts of excitement and datbayos from the young boy. The pair headed to the ramen bar and talked while enjoying a few bowls of the delicious noodles. Since then Iruka would occasionally treat Naruto to ramen after he would train in the academy grounds after school. The pair grew close and Iruka began to view Naruto as the little brother he never had. Ah, Naruto, I am pleasantly surprised to see you here already, Iruka said from the front of the class. Are you going to be my new sensei this year, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked with hopefulness. Hi, and not just for this year but your final year as well, Iruka said before turning to Mizuki and discussing plans for the rest of the day. Naruto sat in his chair and watched as the rest of his classmates walked into the room. The first to walk in was surprisingly Nara Shikamaru and Akamichi Choji. Choji was eating a bag of potato chips while Shikamaru walked into class with his hands in his pockets, grumbling about something. They sat in the middle toward the back with Shikamaru attempting to take a nap. The next group to walk in was the sulking and brooding Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto never liked him because, in a lot ways, he had what Naruto craved and he couldn't have cared less. Everyone wanted to be his friend and the girls fawned over him, but most of all he got the instruction Naruto always wanted. Naruto knew that they were also the same in a lot of ways. Alone and without a family, but at least people wanted to be around him. Examples A and B followed closely behind him. Yamanaka Ino and Haruno Sakura were at each other's throats again over something involving their precious Sasuke-kun. Naruto wondered why they didn't just sit on either side of him until he noticed Aburame Shino sitting next to him. Naruto had to do a double take. When the hell did he show up? A screech was heard when the duo of Ino and Sakura saw that. While they were arguing, another girl from their class had slipped into their coveted chair unnoticed. Even though she was loud, he had to admit that Sakura looked cute with her pink hair. Suddenly Naruto was staring into a white, furry butt. Sitting in front of him, and smelling like he hadn't bathed in weeks, was Inuzuka Kiba with his partner Akamaru. Akamaru sniffed the air before turning to Naruto and growling as menacingly as a puppy could. Kiba heard the noise and looked up to his ninkin before turning to the figure that had caused the disruption. What is it, boy? He asked, getting a bark in reply. Nah, you don't smell fox, you smell loser. Kiba laughed before turning back to the front of the room. Hey Hinata, come sit next to me. Naruto followed his eyes to see Hyuga Hinata standing in front of the room looking in their direction. She wore blue ninja pants with blue sandals. Over her other clothes she wore a large brown hoodie with white fur at the bottom. She wore her hair short with two violet bangs framing her face. The most noticeable feature was her violet, pupil-less eyes. Naruto saw her fiddle with her fingers while looking between the empty seat next to Naruto and the exuberant Kiba. Oh, okay, Kiba-kun, she said hesitantly before taking the seat next to the Inuzuka and his ninkin. Naruto caught her eyes as she tried to peek back at him. She gave an eep and turned herself back to the front, her face turning a dark shade of red. That was weird, Naruto thought as he looked at the young Hyuga. Why is her face red? Is she sick? Maybe I should go tell Iruka-sensei afterwards. His thoughts were quickly shut off as he heard Iruka announce the beginning of the first day of classes for the year. Naruto smiled as he heard the curriculum for the year. It would be a lot of basic chakra control, more advanced taijutsu and genjutsu training while also brushing up on the 3 basic ninjutsus taught at the academy. What really got Naruto excited was the tracking and survival portion of the class. He might actually get to show off. Naruto quickly got bored as Iruka began a lecture of things taught last year as a refresher. Normally he would be listening to his older brother figure, but they were the same basic things the foxes had taught him, especially Ari-sensei and her chakra exercises. Man, this is boring. We already know this stuff, a voice came from Naruto's shoulder. Yeah, no kidding, Ishiri. Even going through Bruno-sensei's workouts are better than this, Naruto said, not noticing what exactly was happening. Hey Ishiri. The light bulb finally clicked. Ack! Naruto exclaimed as he fell backwards. Ishiri laughed as Naruto quickly put him in his backpack before hearing the sound of Iruka shouting. Uzumaki Naruto, what is the problem back there? Iruka demanded from the front of the classroom. Naruto panicked as he looked in his backpack, trying to find something, anything to tell as a believable lie. I was just looking for a scroll, Naruto said as he grabbed a scroll offered to him by the orange fox that was currently dwelling in his backpack. Good to see you taking these lectures more seriously this year, Naruto, but can you do it a little more quietly next time? Iruka asked. Yeah, right. Asking Naruto to do something quietly is like asking Choji to stop stuffing his face with food. Kiba commented to everyone's laughter except Choji, Naruto and Hinata, who just played with her fingers and looked down at her desk. After a bit, when he didn't think Iruka was watching, he turned back and peeked into his backpack. Ishiri, what are you doing here? Naruto whispered hotly at his partner. I was bored back at your apartment waiting for you to summon me, so I snuck out and followed your scent here, he said with a smile of accomplishment on his face. What if you got caught? What then? Naruto asked. PSH. After being chased by Shadow and Twilight Sensei for 2 months, civvies are nothing. He attempted to take a peep out of the backpack before Naruto pushed his head back down. Ow, what was that for? He asked as he rubbed the top of his head. Because you aren't supposed to be here, he exclaimed just a little too loudly. He froze when he heard Iruak clear his throat from the front of the classroom. Are you having troubles finding something else in your backpack, Naruto, or are you hiding something? Naruto went pale, thinking he had been caught. Ishiri also had a pale look in his eyes, but both exhaled in relief as the loud mouth of Yamanaka Ino saved them. He's probably fascinated by the thing called a zipper, she commented. He's so stupid he probably just figured out how to use one. Again the class laughed at his expense before he pulled out a pencil, making it seem like he had been fishing around for it instead of talking to Ishiri. A few minutes later he felt something in his lap. He looked down and had to swallow the shout of shock that threatened to disturb Iruka again. On his lap, sitting on his haunches and staring at the board, was Ishiri. Oi Naruto, why do you have classes in a building? Shouldn't ninjas be outside doing actual training? Before he could answer, he heard a growl coming from in front of him. The duo looked up to see Akamaru firmly staring down Ishiri, teeth bare and eyes narrowed. Naruto again pushed Ishiri below the desk, out of view of everyone else in class. Iruka turned to Kiba and noticed Akamaru acting up. Kiba, control your ninkin or else he will be forced to sit outside for the remainder of the school day, Iruka announced. At hearing this, Akamaru yelped before turning back around and staring straight ahead with a pale Kiba underneath. Why yes, Iruka-sensei. Won't happen again, Kiba said. Go easy on him, Iruka-sensei, Naruto spoke up. That poor dog probably caught fleas from the smelly mud he's sitting on. The class erupted in laughter while Naruto celebrated in his mind for his first payback. Either that or he was whimpering due to Ino's loud and annoying voice. And there's the second, he thought, as again the class erupted into laughter. That is enough, Iruka exclaimed, attempting to gain an ounce of control over his class. Everyone quiet. Naruto, Ino and Kiba, this is your last warning. Another outburst from either of you, or your ninkin, and you'll receive detention. Got it? All 3 students nodded their heads in understanding. Naruto attempted to pay attention, but between his notes, Iruka's lecture and keeping Ishiri quiet and out of sight, he wasn't doing a good job. He was about to go insane before Iruka made an announcement an hour into class. Alright, that is enough lecturing for today, he said to the cheers of his students. We will now see who of you put time into your training over the summer by demonstrating your skills outside before lunch. Thanked Kami. Naruto thought with a sigh of relief. Maybe Ishiri will be better behaved outside. He looked down to see the happy twinkle in his eyes. Or not. Ishiri, go and hide in a tree while we are outside, okay? But why can't I participate with you? He asked with a hurt look in his eyes. We are a team. We are supposed to do things like this together. Naruto groaned as he sadly saw the logic in the orange fox's logic before an idea came to him. You wouldn't want me to tell Luna-sama that you disobeyed direct orders, would you? Ishiri looked up at him with widened eyes. You wouldn't dare tell Ka-chan. Would you, Naruto? He asked with pleading eyes. You get me in trouble and I am taking you with me, partner. Ishiri huffed in indignation before turning back to Naruto. Fine, I will stay out of sight, but can I at least hang out with you at school now instead of back at your apartment? If you promise to keep a low profile then yes, Naruto answered, much to Ishiri's happiness. Deal. Naruto, hurry up, Iruka yelled from the front of the room. Naruto looked up to see all the other students filing out of the classroom and into the hall. We are going to be behind schedule if you don't hurry up. Coming, Iruka-sensei, Naruto shouted as he set Ishiri under the desk, out of sight, and taking off for the door, following the rest of the students out to the training grounds of the academy. Ishiri yawned as he took a look towards the sparring circle where various students were going at it. The fighting had been rather boring, with no real spar being interesting. The girls, aside from the girl with violet hair, just flailed around without a real strategy. The boys weren't much better. Ishiri perked up when he looked up to see the boy with the mutt step into the circle against another who looked bored out there, a fan painted on the back of his shirt. This might be interesting, he thought as the Inuzuka rushed his opponent. The other boy blocked the first punch and pulled his opponent down into a knee that was thrown upwards. The other boy staggered back, holding his nose with a little blood squirting out. The boy again charged and decided to aim a kick at his opponent's head, which was easily ducked. The other combatant twisted on the ground before throwing his foot up and connecting it with the chin of his opponent, who had spun into it. The boy went flying. Kiba attempted to get up when a foot was placed against his chest, pushing him back down. He looked up to see Sasuke staring down at him with a smirk. And then maybe it won't. Ishiri thought in boredom before a smile appeared on his face as Naruto stepped into the ring. His smile vanished as he heard a recognizable growl. He turned and sighed when he saw Akamaru standing there snarling at him. "Oi, mutt, what do you want?" Ishiri asked. Akamaru responded by lowering his body to the ground and quietly barking. "You want to fight?" Ishiri asked with a puzzled look. "Buzz off, I am watching my partner down there. I let you watch yours quietly, so let me watch mine. So either sit down and shut up or leave." Akamaru paused and shifted his eyes to the boys standing in the middle of the ring. He smirked when he saw he was right. The blonde oozed the smell of fox. He shook his head and walked closer to the orange fox and nipped at his tail only to miss it. "Oi, I said sit down," Ishiri yelled. He brought his paw up and hit the ninkin atop his head, sending him off the branch and onto the ground below. Ishiri chuckled as the white dog bounced around the branches and onto the ground before his master realized where he was. Kiba ran over to his hurt ninkin. Physically he was fine, but his pride was in shambles. He had just been swatted like a fly by a tiny fox. He had to make sure the other Inuzuka ninkin didn't hear about this or the torment would be unending. Ishiri smirked as the pair walked away before turning back to his partner in crime. His fight just began versus a plain-looking civilian child. Naruto looked at his opponent. He wasn't much, a student from a civilian family, but he still beat Naruto a lot last year during taijutsu spars. The boy smirked back, thinking he had an easy win. Naruto got into his fighting position, fists up with his body slightly turned so his left foot was in front of his right. Iruka stood in between the two. He raised his hands in the air before sending them down and starting the fight. The boy rushed Naruto, throwing a punch with his right. Naruto took his left hand and brushed it away before slamming a jab into his opponent's gut. His opponent lurched forward and grabbed his stomach only to be hit in the ribs with a kick and sent skidding on his back. He groaned as he stood up to see Naruto had barely moved, getting back into his starting position. The boy roared as he ran forward with a flurry of punches and kicks. Naruto breathed as everything seemed to slow down. He concentrated on his opponent's movements, remembering his lessons from Bruno. Naruto yelled at the top of his lungs. "Dat Bayo, I finally beat you. I finally got you, you old furball." Naruto currently had a hanged Bruno pinned against a tree with his forearm. Bruno puffed back to his fox form as he used his tail to brush away the blonde boy. "You have really improved, Naruto, but remember to not get too cocky." "Ha, you should be taking your own advice," Naruto shouted back. "You got cocky and I totally beat you. Would you care for a rematch?" Bruno asked with a smirk of his face. "You bet I would," Naruto stated. "Ishiri is too much of a chicken to go again. If you hadn't somehow dropped a tree on my tail I would be kicking your ass," Ishiri yelled from the sidelines with a look of fury on his face. He looked back down to his poor tail, which had an ice pack on it. He would be feeling this injury for a while. Enough, Bruno stated, transforming back into a human figure. Now shall we start? You bet. I am gone. Before Naruto could even finish his statement, he was on his back with a grinning Bruno over him. Dead, he said with a sickly satisfied ring to his voice. This time try to slow your breathing and focus on my movements. Naruto could only tentatively nod up to the scarred fox. Hi Bruno-sensei. Naruto got up and rubbed his shoulder before getting back into his practiced stance. Naruto focused hard on his opponent as again Bruno got him to the ground without so much as a fight. You call that concentration? Bruno asked, standing above his student. I have seen newborn kids with more concentration than that. If you want to have any chance of dodging me, let alone landing a strike, then you will need to step it up, kid. Bruno inwardly smirked, as the blonde seemed to become even more determined with the challenge. He never backed down and Bruno liked it. This boy has more guts than anyone I have ever seen. The sky's the limit for this kid. Naruto brushed himself off as he got back into his position. He concentrated back onto his sensei, his entire energy focused on the slightest twitch of his teacher's muscles. He felt a weird sensation in his eyes but could not think about it as he saw his sensei move. He barely managed to get out of the way of the flying knee that had gotten him 2 other times. He picked himself back up panting. Ishiri had his jaw on floor at the movement and even Bruno had a smirk on his face. Good, now let's see if you can do that again. Naruto breathed and danced around the barrage of kicks and punches. Twisting and turning, he kept in front of every move as if his opponent was moving in slow motion. He saw his opportunity. A swinging kick left his opponent slightly off-balanced. Naruto ducked the kick and swept the boy's leg with his own. The boy fell to the ground with a thud. Keeping his momentum going, Naruto placed both of his hands on the ground so he was now in a spinning handstand. He brought his leg from full extension down onto his opponent's midsection as his own shoulder blades hit the ground. A silent cry of pain came from the boy's mouth as bits of blood were spit out. When the boy opened his eyes, he saw Naruto straddling him, his left fist forward and the other cocked back ready for the finishing blow. Dead, Naruto shouted, still used to his sparring sessions with Bruno and Ishiri. Naruto stood up panting as the others stood there in shock even as Iruka was naming Naruto the winner. Did his eyes turn yellow during that fight? Iruka thought as he looked at Naruto with surprise. He was shook from his thoughts. He cheated, the boy yelled as he jumped up. No way he could ever get that good. He's the Dobi, the dead last. Shouts of agreement resounded throughout the class. No one believed Naruto could win by himself, not without either a miracle or cheating. All but a few were shouting for a redo. Hinata looked on, twiddling her fingers together as a small blush worked across her smiling face. He is called a failure, why yet he works so hard. Look at what he has done. Way to go Naruto, I wish I was as confident as you are. Sasuke, on the other hand, was seething behind grinding teeth. How did he get so good so fast? There is no way the Dobi learned that on his own. He must have an extra tutor, but why waste time on him when I am the genius? Mizuki also hid his grinding teeth behind a smile. His plans were unfolding before his very eyes. If Naruto had improved so much in taijutsu, then what else could he have improved on? At this rate he wouldn't fail as planned, but Danzo had said the boy would fail, he guaranteed it. Iruka held a smile on his face. He was really proud about his favorite student's progress. Naruto didn't cheat students. This is what happens when you work hard and apply yourself. The students just blew off the Chunin except from an indigo-haired girl who was nodding sheepishly in the back, her eyes focused on Naruto with a smile on her face. Ishiri watched with amusement as the rest of the trainees were put through spars. Not many were good fights and 2 refused to fight each other. Some kid who couldn't keep his hands out of a bag of potato chips and a lazy boy with a pineapple haircut. Ishiri's ears perked up at the next announcement. Alright, let's move on, Iruka said to the class. Naruto beamed a smile until he heard what they would be doing. Line up and we will test your clone jutsu. First up will be Haruno Sakura. Ishiri groaned as he put his head on the limb he was sitting on. He put his paws over his eyes. Not the clone jutsu. Give him the transformation or substitution jutsu, but not the clone jutsu, anything but that. He lifted a paw when he heard his partner's name called. Naruto stepped in front of the line. He looked at Iruka sheepishly before going through the needed hand seals. Clone Jutsu, Naruto announced with blue chakras circling and twisting around him. A puff of smoke enveloped him and the surrounding kids. Naruto coughed and waved his arms around to clear the smoke away. He opened his eyes to see a sickly Naruto clone fluttering around like a piece of paper in the wind before falling down, much to everyone's amusement. Naruto felt his temper begin to come undone. He went through the hand signs and tried it again and again with the same result each time. Alright Naruto, that is enough, Iruka said with a sad smile on his face. We'll work on it later. Naruto looked on as the other kids did perfect, or close to perfect, clones. He remembered his failed clones and smiled slightly. Well, they were better than this summer, I guess. Next up was kunai throwing. Sasuke was the first to go. He jumped into the air and did a little twirl, releasing all the kunai at once. Each kunai resounded with a thud, perfectly embedded in each of the 5 targets. The girls fawned over him as he stuck his hands back into his pockets and walked away. Naruto was up next. While he wasn't as proficient as the Uchiha, he managed to hit the bullseye on 3 of the 5 tries and hit all the targets, which managed to get him into second among the male students. Again, shouts of accusations were thrown around as he stepped out of the throwing area. Ishiri looked on with shock as the boys missed the bullseye on majority of their throws and some the target altogether. Weren't they ninja? This should have been second nature to them. What made him cringe the most was the fact some of wannabe kunoichi couldn't even embed the kunai into the target. And Naruto was the dead last. How? That would become clear as the chakra control session was completed. The objective was easy. Expel chakra to keep a ping-pong ball in the air for 5 seconds. Everyone seemed to easily do this except for Naruto. They were still searching for his. Ishiri heard the exclamation of, "Ow," about 100 yards away. He looked up to see a slight breeze in that direction. Yep, seems about right. Overall, Naruto couldn't complain. He had showed off his new skills much to Iruka's enjoyment. Naruto actually felt excited for the upcoming year of classes. Naruto's enthusiasm didn't last as he sat on a swing in the courtyard of the academy, watching as parents or older siblings picked up his classmates. He hated this part of the academy more than anything else. He would go through taijutsu katas all day long if it meant he didn't have to see this sight. What made it worse were the civilian parents who would openly scowl at him when passing. At least the shinobi parents averted their eyes. It made it seem like they didn't completely hate him. He swung underneath the tree the swing was under, thinking about how it would be to have a family who loved him. "Hey Luna-sama?" Naruto asked through panting breathing. He looked up to see the curious gaze of the matriarch fixed on him. "Yes, young one?" she asked with curiosity. The young blood had been particularly quiet today during ninjutsu practice, much to her worry. He had never been this quiet. "Can you tell me about my clan?" he asked. He saw a small wince from the large silver vixen. Luna averted her eyes from her young charge. Unfortunately, her eyes fell on her son, Ishiri. She remembered Naruto never had a family, never knew what it was like to have a clan. She pictured what Ishiri would be like, shunned by his kind, no one to look after him. She often wondered how Naruto had survived this long. He deserves to know, even if it hurts to tell him. They were an interesting clan, she said, still looking at Ishiri. They were loud-mouthed, ill-tempered and stubborn to a fault, but they were also kind and gentle. They would throw a party and made sure everyone was invited. They were also ruthless in battle. It was funny. They would be your enemy 1 minute and then your best friend the next. She sighed as she remembered the harder parts of the lost clan. They were known for a few things. They were known for their red hair and green eyes, obviously something you got from your father, whoever it was. More importantly, they were known for their long life, immense chakra reserves, and their proficiency in both fuinjutsu and kenjutsu. It was these traits that lead to their downfall. Naruto saw the pain in the large vixen's eyes. She wasn't taking this talk well. What happened to them? Luna sighed as she turned back to the curious boy. They once had their own village. They built it in Uzu no Kuni and their village was named Uzu Shiogakure. It was nicknamed, the Village of Longevity, for the long lifespans of the Uzumaki clan. During the Third Shinobi War they were targeted. Weighed down by major battles and other small skirmishes, Konoha was unable to send reinforcements to Uzu no Kuni. They arrived to the site of Uzu burning and buildings crumbling. They were a day late. Luna stopped and sighed, trying to push through the last bit of her story. The Uzumaki live on, scattered throughout the 5 elemental nations. She turned to Naruto and a brief smile made its way onto her face. You do their memory proud, little one. Naruto sat there and digested the story. It was a lot to take in. I wish I could meet the survivors, he said finally. It would be nice to have a clan, ya know? I always wanted to know how it felt like to have a family. Oh, but you do, Naruto-chan, Luna said with a small smile on her lips. You are a member of the Kitsune clan. You are without a family no more. Naruto was pulled from his thoughts by an orange tail waving in front of his face. Oi, Earth to Naruto, Ishiri said jokingly. Come on, we got to get going or else Ka-chan is gonna be furious. You have to have energy after that boring day. Ishiri jumped off his head and into his backpack. He rustled around before sticking his head back up. Now come on, we got real training to do. Naruto's smile returned as he threw himself from the swing and began his run out into the woods. Yeah, you're right. I still have enough energy to kick your butt. Naruto snickered as he heard his friend's response. Luna was right. He was a part of a clan. Naruto had his head down on the top of the desk, thoroughly enjoying a nap before a screech of disbelief, followed by a second, awoke him from his slumber. He opened his eyes, vision still blurry, to see the class was circled around the newest chart showing their most recent testing results. Iruka-sensei, this can't be right, came a shout of disbelief. There is no way the mutt and the dobi got better test grades than me. Naruto raised an eyebrow as a fuming Sasuke came storming out of the circle. The dobi has never gotten an A in his life and now all of the sudden he aces the hardest exam of the year? Both of Naruto's eyebrows rose at this. The test hadn't been that hard. For the past month the class had been going over tracking and stealth. Naruto's enthusiasm was quickly curbed when all they had done was theoretical work in class and very basic exercises out in the training grounds. How to backtrack, crawl on your stomach and creating camouflage to match the environment and other basic things had been covered before going on to how to follow an enemy ninja using the terrain. Naruto snoozed through the theoretical work while goofing off when they went outside. It wasn't that he didn't like the classes, but he already knew everything. Even the more advanced techniques were covered by the Yin-Yang brothers and taken even further during their daily games of cat and mouse. Compared to that, the classes at the academy were a piece of cake. Naruto impressed both Iruka and Mizuki as he walked through the techniques and pointing out the little nuisances of tracking even they didn't know. Had they not tried to not release the supposed genjutsu they were under, they would have thought Naruto was a disguised Anbu pranking them. The most impressive part had easily been the written test. Iruka and Mizuki graded his test 3 different times. The test over tracking and stealth was known as the hardest test given by the academy. Usually half the class failed and no one had ever aced the written portion, let alone the full test. Oi, what is all the commotion? Ishiri mumbled from his curled position on Naruto's lap. The hell is Mr. Moody all bent out of shape about? Ishiri had gone with Naruto to class the entire school year and managed to stay hidden. During the more boring classes he would constantly be found messing with Akamaru, making the ninkin sit outside on multiple occasions and each time he would be nowhere in sight. Apparently I aced the test, Naruto whispered back as he stared at the murmuring circle in the front of the room. You sure they didn't get something wrong? It's you we're talking about here, Ishiri said before ducking into Naruto's backpack as the whiskered boy rose to his feet. Yeah, I know, right? Naruto chuckled. He walked up to the chart and began to search for his name. Out of habit he began at the bottom. He scrunched his brows together as he looked at the bottom to see a civilian kid's name there. His smile began to grow as his eyes began to make his way up the charts until he was beaming a full smile. Uchiha Sasuke, 97%. Inazuka Kiba, 98%. And the most badass ninja in Konoha, Uzumaki Naruto, a 100%. Naruto was smiling before hitting the board in front of him. Behind him was a fuming Haruno Sakura. "Oi, you got lucky, Baka," she shouted. "No way are you better than Sasuke-kun. He will wipe the floor with you in the field test." "The field test?" Naruto looked at Sakura with a look of confusion, earning a huff of annoyance. "You really are a Baka," Sakura muttered before looking at the blonde boy. "The tracking and stealth test has 2 portions, the written and the field test. Both are worth half of your grade in the subjects, but don't worry, you won't beat Sasuke-kun at that part. No one has aced that part of the test ever. But I beat him at the written portion. What makes you think I wouldn't do it in the field portion too?" Because you are a baka, Ino and Sakura responded at the same time to the laughter of the rest of the class. Geez, congratulations would have been nice at least, Naruto muttered under his breath. He was disappointed that he didn't have a single person congratulate him like they all did, Sasuke-kun, whenever he got the highest grade in the class. Nice job Naruto-kun. Congratulations. Naruto turned to see Hinata standing near the charts while playing with her fingers. I think you will do great tomorrow B because you always do your best. Naruto chuckled, placing a hand behind his head. Hey thanks Hinata. I bet you'll ace tomorrow too. Hinata's faint pink blush turned rose red as her eyes got wide and quickly averted them to the ground. Why you really think so Naruto-kun? She asked quietly. Before Naruto could respond Iruka interrupted. Alright class, settle down and return to your seats. Naruto, well done on the written portion. Really impressive. Naruto beamed up at his sensei who returned it with one of his own. Now tonight make sure you get enough sleep. Tomorrow is the field test and you will want to be well rested because it will be very intense. Understood? Once he was satisfied that all his students understood, he dismissed them early. So how are we gonna beat the pants off that smug mutt and his owner tomorrow? Ishiri asked from his spot in Naruto's backpack. They had just gotten done with their training with the Yin-Yang brothers to ensure Naruto was ready for tomorrow's field portion. Ishiri, I want to pass this thing on my own like I did on the written portion, Naruto answered back. Ishiri's jaw dropped at his partner's response. He took his paw and hit him on the head. Ignoring the Jinchuriki, he began his tirade. You are gonna let that Inuzuka use his less than useless mutt while you have me as your ace in the hole? Hell, if you really wanted to win and get done with it fast, then you'd summon Shadow and Twilight Sensei. They'd get it done so fast it would make that white furball's head spin. Stuck-up ninkin thinking he is better than me because he can sit anywhere he wants in class. Gets the attention of all the girls in the room and gets his ears scratched. Boss spoiled baka. Ishiri turned his nose up at the end of his tirade. Do I sense a bit of jealousy, Ishiri? Naruto prodded with a smirk. I thought you said that Akamaru wasn't an issue to a clever and awesome fox like you. It isn't fair, Naruto, Ishiri shot back. He gets to parade around like he is all high and mighty because he gets to hang out with his partner in plain daylight. We're partners too, Naruto, and you know I could beat the pants off that straggly mutt. It isn't fair that he gets to be out in the open while I sit in a backpack next to unused scrolls and pencils. Please Naruto, let me help you. Naruto put his hand under his chin as he thought about Ishiri's argument before the bump on the back of his head reminded him of earlier that day. He had aced that test fair and square and yet no one believed he could do it. He had finally proven he was good at something only to be mocked and hit on the back of the head. Even though he had been the best in the class, he had been labeled the doby. He gritted his teeth as the determination returned to his eyes with full force. I'm sorry Ishiri, but I can't do that, Naruto stated. A screech of disbelief came from the orange fox, but Naruto raised his hand to stop any type of argument from passing the kitsune's lips. Ishiri, I have to prove to them that I can beat those guys and everyone else. Especially on my own 2 feet. I can't be expecting someone to come in and help me when I am caught in a tight spot. But we're partners, Ishiri said. His ears were lowered and a sad look was in his eyes. We're supposed to do these things together. Remember how you felt when the foxes your age mocked you for thinking you found a new summoner? Ishiri raised his eyebrow at his partner before slowly nodding his head. Well, it is kind of the same thing for me. I want to prove them wrong. For my entire life I have been put down as a loser, as someone who couldn't be anything, and I want to prove them wrong. I know we are partners, but sometimes you have to prove to yourself that you can do something on your own. Does that make sense? Ishiri crawled into Naruto's backpack and stayed there for a bit as Naruto walked back to his apartment. The more he thought about it, the more he realized he had put his own, selfish feelings above those of his partners. He knew Naruto looked upon him as an equal and not merely a ninkin like Akamaru. Still, it hurt to know that he would again take a back seat to the furball. He couldn't deny what Naruto said was true. His own battle was fought on similar terms. He was against everyone else who thought he was nothing, and he had proven them wrong. Ishiri heard the click of the doorknob to Naruto's apartment and peeked his head out before crawling out and sitting on the kitchen table. He stayed quiet, looking at his dinner while Naruto scarfed his down. Alright Naruto, I understand, he finally said as he looked up to his partner. Naruto tilted his head, as he looked at the young kitsune with a puzzled expression. About tomorrow. I am not ecstatic about it, but I understand that you need to do this on your own. Just know that if you need me I am just one summons away. Naruto wiped his mouth of stray particles of food. He gave his partner a slight smile. He knew how much something like this would mean to him. Thanks a lot Ishiri, and I promise that next time we will beat the pants off of Kiba and Akamaru as a team. Deal? Ishiri had a smile on his face as he nodded slightly. Deal. Alright students, this will be your last test of the year before your finals, Iruka said with 5 Anbu standing behind him. Each of the students looked up to the Anbu with wide eyes. Even Sasuke was thinking his sensei had blown a fuse. Each of these 5 Anbu will be hidden throughout the surrounding areas outside of the village and the village itself. The area where they can hide will be 3 kilometers from the outside of the wall and everything within that radius. Their hiding spots have been determined already. Each of you will have these, Iruka said as he lifted a piece of paper with 5 marks on it. Each Anbu member will have a stamp at their location. Each stamp is worth a different value. Anbu, please introduce yourself and the point value you represent. The first one to step up was a burly-looking ninja, possibly male, with a ferret mask on. I am Ferret and I will be worth 15 points. He stepped back to allow the next Anbu member to step to the front. I am Boar and I am worth 20 points, said the blood-haired ninja with the mask that resembled the hog on it. Judging by his voice he was also male. He stepped back and the next person to step up was an Anbu with long brown hair. I am Wolf and I am worth 30 points. Following her was a man with a bird mask on who claimed he was worth 40 points. The last Anbu to step forward wore a cat mask with long, purple hair flowing freely behind her lithe form. And I am Cat. I am worth 60 points. I will be the most difficult to find. No one has gotten my stamp in 3 years. The voice made it sound like the person was smirking behind the mask. The rest of class looked at her with wide eyes. Iruka was about to speak but was interrupted when he saw a raised hand. Yes, Sakura? Iruka sensei, there is enough points to be worth 165 points. Is that how much our test is worth? Very good question, Sakura. No, the test is not worth 165 points. This test is instead graded on a curve of sorts. You will have 5 hours to find enough points and return here before time runs out. AD is anything above 40 points, AC 50 points, B 60 and finally an A is 80 points. Iruka silenced the outcry at how far the differences was between an A and a B. He continued on. There is one important thing to know, and that is if you do not return with your paper to the academy within the allotted time, then you will receive a 0. When does the test start? Sasuke asked deadpanned. He was bound and determined to not let Naruto or Kiba beat him this time. Once was bad enough, but he would not let it become a habit. We will give the Anbu 30 minutes to get to their hiding spots. During that time the doors will be shut and the blinds closed so you cannot see in what direction they are headed. Any questions? Iruka smiled as he saw all his students shake their heads. Good, and with that, Anbu if you please. No sooner had Iruka finished than one of the Anbu threw a smoke bomb onto the ground. The smoke settled to show that the members of the Anbu team had vanished into thin air. Iruka looked on with a smile as his student quit coughing. He looked to see the looks of surprise and awe that filled their eyes, mixed with fear. This is the first part of the test. If they are afraid of who they are tracking, they will unknowingly miss obvious signs and lose their trail. We'll see if any of them have what it takes to be a tracker. Iruka looked on to see 3 pairs of eyes dead set with determination. Those 3 could make the best tracking team Konoha has ever seen if they could ever work together. Hinata looked on with slight fear and trepidation as the Anbu seemingly vanished. Her fear and tepidness vanished when she looked on her crush. He stood there with a steely look in his gaze, his deep blue eyes shining with determination. That look gave her willpower, however small it might have been, to try something bold. She was going to ask Naruto if he wanted to do this test together, as a team. She gulped before clenching her fists and taking a shaky first step, only to yelp when Kiba got in her way. Come with me, Hinata, Kiba said, pointing to himself. With your eyes, Akamaru's nose and my awesome tracking skills, we'll get an A on this test easily. In fact, we will get all 165 of them. His shouts of pride were quickly derailed by a snort of disbelief. As if, Sasuke stated. You and the Dobi got lucky with the written portion, but I will show you who the best around here is. That's right. Sasuke-kun will win for sure, and I am gonna be there the entire step of the way, Sakura said with a proud smirk on her face. Yeah right, billboard brow, Ino responded back. Sasuke-kun wouldn't be able to see anything past your massive forehead. He'd be better off with me. Ino accentuated her point by flicking her hair and putting a hand on her hip. Sasuke scowled as the two girls created a dust cloud in the ensuing brawl before Iruka had to break the pair up. How he hated fangirls. Hinata looked at the girls with a far-off stare before Kiba brought her back into the present. Huh? Oh I am sorry Kiba-kun, but I was planning on maybe going with someone else this time. Hinata hated herself for not speaking up more enthusiastically and expressing what she really wanted. She liked Kiba, but she admired Naruto and wanted to work with him. You can't be thinking about Naruto baka, Kiba stated once he saw her look his way. Hinata turned red as a tomato at the statement. He may have gotten the best grade on the written part of the test, but no one is better than the Inuzuka at tracking except maybe the Hyuga. That's why we'd make the perfect team. What do you say, Hinata? Hinata looked into his eyes and saw the absolute joy that the proposition gave him. She couldn't possibly disappoint him, could she? Alright Kiba-kun. Yahoo alright, that's what I'm talking about, Kiba shouted. Akamaru barked happily at the top of his head. You hear that, Naruto? You are going down. Yeah right Mutt, Naruto answered back, not really worrying about the Inuzuka. You couldn't find your own food dish if it wasn't for your mommy having to point it out to you. Kiba fumed at the insult. He couldn't let this Dobi get the best of him in front of Hinata. He had to show who the top dog really was. It wasn't Sasuke and it certainly wasn't Naruto. It was him. Nobody has the senses Akamaru and I have. We are the best tracking duo in the village. Naruto clenched his fists together when he heard that accusation. The best tracking duo in Konoha was Ishiri and himself. No you aren't, he shouted back. PSH yeah right, and who is gonna stop us? You? Damn right I am. Naruto answered back, now nose to nose with the Inuzuka. No way can some mangy stray ever compete with a purebred, Kiba stated with arrogance. What did you say? Naruto could feel his teeth being grinded away. He was not some stray mutt. He was an Uzumaki, of the Uzumaki clan, and more importantly he was a member of the Kitsune clan, and he'd be damned if he let anyone talk bad about them. You heard me. I'll show you. I'll get all 165 points and beat you back here Datbeo. I'd like to see you try. It's on then. Yeah it is. Both boys were nose to nose and growling at each other like two wolves fighting for the position of alpha male. They stood there until they heard the announcement of the beginning of the test. Before Hinata could say anything to calm them down, they were out the door with a trail of dust following them. Kiba quickly picked up the scent of the first Anbu member and headed off into the village while Naruto made a beeline for the forests. Idiot. There wasn't a single scent that went that way. I have got this thing in the bag. Kiba thought as he took off across the rooftops. Naruto didn't see any footprints or signs at all that a member of the Anbu team had entered the forest. Right now he didn't care about that. He found himself a nice covering under a small tree. He took another quick look around to see that no one had followed. He took a deep breath in before biting his thumb and rapidly going through hand signs. Summoning jutsu, he yelled while slapping the ground. Once the smoke vanished, Ishiri appeared half asleep and looking around with a confused look on his face. Is this a dream or something? He asked with dazed eyes. His gaze met Naruto's before something finally clicked in his head. Oi, Naruto, what is it? You ready to beat Kiba and put Akamaru in his place? Naruto didn't hesitate or beat around the bush. He was serious. Ishiri's ears perked up quickly at the mention of his rival before a look of curiosity came to his eyes. What changed your mind? We are gonna prove to him, and everyone else, who the best tracking duo of Konoha really are, Naruto said with a proud smile on his face. Are you in? Ishiri bounced onto his feet with a smile that stretched from one ear to the other. You bet I am. Let's kick some butt. And just like that the duo was sprinting back to the academy to catch up on lost time. Datbeo. That's 3 down and 2 more to go, Naruto exclaimed happily. With Ishiri's help they were zooming through the test. The first had been rather easy. A simple trail that led to the top of a tree not more than a kilometer away from the academy. That had been worth 15 points. The next track took them past a couple creeks and into the trees before finding the second Enbu worth 20 points. The third had been a little trickier. Wolf had used a series of easy-to-release genjutsu, but they were hard to figure out. The genjutsu covered the tracks, bent limbs, and downed grass that would have given away her destination with ease. The trickiest part had been when the Anbu put a genjutsu on herself to hide at the base of a tree. Had it not been for a slight mistake, obviously made for the test, in the pattern of the bark, Naruto would have passed right over her spot and been running around trying to find her. During the test, Ishiri would be right next to Naruto until about 300 meters from the position of the Anbu to stay hidden and still a secret. Ishiri had been key in keeping the track of the second Anbu when he had crossed the river. He had kept the scent easily while the tracks had disappeared in the bed of the creek. The duo were off again to find the tracks of the fourth Anbu, bird, and where he had vanished to. As they were about to enter a clearing, Ishiri ducked into a bush. Naruto froze when he heard the sound of someone coming. He paused before Akamaru appeared, followed closely by Kiba. "Get out of our way, Naruto," Kiba growled. "We are close to getting our fourth stamp. Bet you haven't even found 3 yet." "Don't worry about me, Kiba," Naruto shot back. "Just worry about how you'll look when you have to show up at your compound with your tail between your legs." With a snarl, Kiba and Akamaru were off again toward the awaiting Anbu. Naruto wasn't really worried. Kiba wasn't good at genjutsu, he wasn't either, but he had practice with tracking genjutsu. Shaking his head of the thoughts, he was off again, quickly joined by Ishiri. "Those two annoy me," Ishiri announced while keeping pace with the whiskered boy. "Yeah, me too, but we can't worry about them. Remember what Twilight Sensei taught us about staying calm and not distracted," Naruto said. Yeah, Ishiri brushed off the reminder before mimicking Twilight's voice. Tracking rule number 5. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment and don't lose focus. Hypocrite. All you have to do is show him a picture of a vixen and he is stunned for at least 5 minutes. Pervert. The duo chuckled before coming to the point where Bird's tracks diverged from Wolf's. "Okay, here we are," Naruto said calmly. "You got a trace, Ishiri?" Ishiri raised his head into the air and gave a sniff before lowering his head and thinking. "This one is a little trickier, Naruto. It seems he did a bunch of backtracking and doubling or tripling over his tracks." Damn it, Naruto cursed his luck. He didn't know how much time he had left, but he couldn't waste it, not when Kiba and Akamaru were already ahead of their team. "Okay, let's go with the strongest scent and work backwards." Ishiri nodded before taking off in the direction of the smell. The route took them into a small clearing before Ishiri again paused. He walked to a base of a tree and looked up before heading over to another tree and repeating the process. He sat down in the middle of the clearing and rubbed his nose. "What is it?" Naruto asked his partner. "There is the same scent, but it goes off in multiple directions. The worst part is they are all about the same intensity," Ishiri said while rubbing his nose. "I don't know if I put my nose into something or what, but it all smells the same to me." Naruto looked back up to the trees and saw something before closing his eyes and shaking his head. He opened his eyes to reveal a gleam in them. "It isn't you, Ishiri, that Anbu had a nice little trick." He used this clearing as a point of reference. He would leave the clearing before returning to it in some other direction. "Look here." Naruto pointed to a branch that was bent toward the forest before pointing to another set that was slightly pushed into the center of the clearing. "I bet you they have the same scent on them." Ishiri quirked an eyebrow before bounding near the 2 sets and sniffed each of them. He snorted his nose before jumping back and joining Naruto in the middle of the clearing. "Yeah, you're right. They are about the same intensity. The tracks are so new that it is hard to tell which one was the first and which one is the last." "Why would he do something like that?" "To keep us going in a circle and waste time," Naruto pointed out. "This technique is used when you are caught but need to stay near a destination, usually used by assassins. They mask their movements by doing this, keeping trackers and ninjas using scent, while they stay perfectly hidden. Usually buys them enough time to make their hit and then they are off." "Okay, that explains that, but it doesn't explain where he went," Ishiri complained. "We basically are starting with nothing. Caught in a maze of useless scents and pointless tracks." Naruto sat down next to his partner as both took in the things they knew about the tracks before a light bulb came into Naruto's mind. "Hey Ishiri, how do you get through a maze without a finish?" Ishiri looked up to the blonde boy who was beaming a smile his way. He saw no point in the question before answering. Well, by not entering it, of course, he stated as if it was obvious. Then that is exactly what we're going to do. We are going to go back to the beginning where we entered his maze, Naruto said before jumping off into the trees, followed quickly by Ishiri. They came to the spot where Wolf and Bird's scents diverged. Okay Naruto, we are back to the start, but I still don't see the point of this, Ishiri said as he looked at the tree where they were perched in. I don't see anything here. Exactly, Naruto smirked. Go hide in a bush. I will write back with our fourth stamp. Ishiri quirked an eyebrow before bounding off into a nearby bush. Naruto waited until his partner was well hidden before jumping further up the tree. Naruto looked around before slapping his forehead. Sitting with his feet up and leaning back in a makeshift nest was Bird. Some of you Anbu take your names way too seriously, Naruto muttered, shocking Bird from the scroll he was reading. Interesting, wasn't expecting you to be the third student to find me, Bird said while he pulled out a stamp with one hand and with the other requested Naruto's paper. I figured it would have been the Hyuga or Aburame, but I can't say that I am not impressed. 4 stamps, well done, but don't expect to find cat. Bird handed the piece of paper back to Naruto, who quickly snatched it from his hands. He looked at the Anbu with a look of annoyance. Don't underestimate me. I am gonna find the 5th stamp and kick that mutt's butt. Believe it. And with that Naruto was off again. Bird sat back thinking about his 3 visitors. He was impressed they had found him so quickly. Usually he could read his scroll in peace for the first 4 hours of the test before maybe 1 or 2 found out about his little maze. He pondered about what Iruka and the Hokage had planned for the rookie teams after the next school year. A tracking team of an Uchiha, Inuzuka, and that kid would make one hell of a squad. He shrugged his shoulders before returning to his scroll. Ishiri waited patiently in his bush before suddenly moved his tail out of the way of the incoming Naruto. Oi, Naruto, what have I told you a million times? Watch the tail, Ishiri spat as he held his tail with his front paws clenched to his body. Did you get it? I don't know, you tell me, Naruto said, unveiling the sheet of paper. Does that look like a bird stamp or what? Now we're talking, but how did you know he was there? Ishiri asked. A maze leading nowhere has to have a way to get out of it. There wasn't much to indicate he went up into the trees, but we followed every scent and came up empty. Figured he had to be somewhere. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. What better way to hide than in the beginning? Those Anbu are tricky, Ishiri muttered. Well, come on, we got one last stamp to find. Let's go. First we got to go back to the academy, Naruto said while shooting off toward the academy. Why do you say that? Ishiri asked from Naruto's shoulder. He was hanging on as the boy was taking off toward the school. Because the last set of tracks leads into the village. I am going to grab my backpack before we head that way so you can come with me and won't have to hide. I like it, Ishiri said with a smile. Team Kitsune is gonna win it all. You know it, dat Bayo, Naruto shouted. Naruto snuck in to find his backpack. He took a quick peek at who had turned theirs in already. He wasn't surprised to see Shikamaru had turned in the first 3 stamps then quit. He was lazy as ever. Joining him was Choji, who was snacking on potato chips. No surprise. Naruto snuck back out before finding Ishiri in a tree by the academy grounds. Ishiri yipped happily before jumping into Naruto's backpack. Naruto had the top slightly unzipped so he could hear Ishiri, and the little fox could also pick up on any scent they found. Liking the setup, Naruto dashed off to where he saw the tracks. He and Ishiri followed the tracks before coming to a screeching halt. They stood in the middle of the busiest market in Konoha. With the Hokage's tower a stone's throw away adding to the foot traffic, the footprints came to a screeching halt. Ishiri, can you pick up on the scent? Naruto whispered to his partner. Ishiri readjusted himself in the bag so he could get a better whiff of the outside area. No Naruto, there is too much interference. I am smelling baked goods, onions, fishes and a whole lot of flowers but not a trace of an Anbu. Okay, how about we backtrack? Maybe she didn't come this way, Naruto suggested. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Ishiri agreed. The duo went back to where they lost the track only to return to the same spot they had stood in the last time. Check the shops. Maybe she went in there and then through the back doors, Ishiri whispered from spot in Naruto's backpack. You know I can't get in there, Ishiri, Naruto answered back. I'm surprised I'm not being kicked out of the market as it is. Well, I can always henge into a cat and sneak in, Ishiri suggested. Naruto slapped his forward. Why hadn't they thought about that before? They really were bakas. Naruto walked into an alley. Jumping behind a dumpster, he took his backpack off and let Ishiri out. The young fox transformed into a cat before purring and strutting off. He is such a ham, Naruto thought as he followed the disguised fox with his eyes. Ishiri entered the businesses without as much a second thought to the owners. He would look around before coming out and shaking his head. After thoroughly checking all the businesses, he returned to Naruto's side. Any luck? Naruto asked. Unless Cat was hanged into one of those demon children, then no such luck, Ishiri muttered. He had been chased out of a daycare he had inspected. The kids were so excited to see a kitty that one had given his tail a rather harsh tug. The daycare was still as a mass frenzy after he had escaped. Somehow I doubt that, Naruto said. He winced as he heard a crash coming from the daycare. Okay, good job Ishiri, hop back in. Ishiri moaned before slinking back into the backpack. Naruto walked back out into the middle of the market. He made a second sweep with his eyes before he heard a commotion. He walked toward the yelling and shouting to see Sasuke and Kiba nose to nose. Or rather, Kiba was, and Sasuke was just standing there with his hands in his pockets. And I'm telling you, Mutt, that she isn't here. She probably left somewhere else, Sasuke said to the frustrated Inuzuka. Kiba was about to respond until he heard a growl from the top of his head. He looked to see Naruto was standing there staring at the two. Oh great, it's Naruto. What do you want, Dobi? Sasuke questioned. You guys looking for Cat too? Naruto didn't respond to Sasuke's question. Yeah, and like I have been telling Kiba here, it is impossible. She is probably tricking us so we forget about our time limit and keep chasing a useless track. Sasuke took a quizzical look at Naruto before continuing on. What is to you, Dobi? No way you found the other 4 stamps. Actually, that is where you are wrong, Teme. I have them right here, Naruto answered with a smile. He unfolded the piece of paper to show his 4 completed stamps. His proud smile turned to a scowl as Kiba took a jab at him. Well, will wonders never cease? The Inuzuka asked sarcastically. Funny, that is what we all said last month when you decided to actually take a bath, Naruto shot back. What did you say? You heard me, baka. You're the baka. You both are bakas. The 2 boys stopped their little spat to look at the Uchiha who just sneered their way. It's useless attempting to follow this trail. I am going back to the academy and get my A. You 2 stay out here and fail if you want. With that, the boy put his hands in his pockets and walked away. He is Mr. Charming, isn't he? Naruto asked with a smirk. Yeah, no kidding, Kiba answered with a slight smile. His smile quickly vanished before he shook his head, remembering who he was talking to. Doesn't matter. I am gonna find her before you, and I am going to prove who the best tracker is. See ya, loser. Naruto looked on as Kiba ran back to the academy to start over again. Naruto waited a bit before going back to looking at the surrounding area. We should follow him, a voice whispered after a while. He may be onto something. We never went back all the way to the academy. Nah, Naruto brushed off the suggestion. The Teme is wrong, we can find her and Kiba is missing something important. What's that? Ishiri asked. What is the number 1 rule of hunting? Ishiri took a second to remember back to their first hunting lesson. He had a curious look on his face as he answered. Think how your prey would think. But we aren't hunting, Naruto. In a way we are, Ishiri, Naruto pointed out. Tracking is just hunting a prey that has a kunai. If we start thinking like the Anbu, then maybe we will be able to find her more easily. Okay, well, how does an Anbu think? Ishiri asked from his spot in his backpack. That's the thing, if we were really working with the Anbu, then they wouldn't have started in the classroom to begin with. Naruto thought about it more before going back to his point. They would never announce who they were, they would stay in the shadows and we would go from there. They gave us a lot of information. Like what? Ishiri wasn't seeing where this was going, but he trusted Naruto enough to play along. Well, they're sent for one. If I hadn't been so stubborn and you had been there, then we would have found the first 3 way faster. That gave people like Kiba a huge advantage. Ishiri nodded at the logic. It made sense so far. Next was their appearance. That would help everyone, but especially Hinata, who could see through bushes and stuff. If she knows what she is looking for, then she will be able to find them a lot faster. Again, Ishiri seemed to agree with the logic, but that still add everything up. Okay, then why do that? It makes it easier for everyone, Ishiri observed. Because we will focus too much on our senses and not on logic. Like rule number 4 said. Where senses fail, intuition and logic prevail, Ishiri finished his partner's statement with a smile. Okay then, now where to? She will be in a place where the smell will stop any tracking that way, Naruto began. The market makes sure of that, Ishiri pointed out. Exactly. That takes care of the nose. Next comes the eyes. The marketplace sort of takes care of that. With all the foot traffic, any sort of footprints that would be left would vanish. Naruto explained, only for Ishiri to interrupt him from continuing. What do you mean by, sort of, Naruto? Ishiri was really confused. It seemed like that would completely take away any tracking by the eyes. Hinata's Byakugan can still peer through things, so if she really wants to eliminate the eyes, then she'll have to be someplace where no vision can penetrate. Naruto smiled as he saw the perfect place. I know exactly where she is. Naruto took to the roofs. He made a beeline to the last place someone would check, the Hokage's tower. He went to the window that led to Gigi's office. He smirked when saw it wasn't completely shut. To someone who wasn't looking for it, it would seem shut and locked, but Naruto saw the slight difference. Without pausing, he threw the window open and bounded in. Hiruzen, dressed in his Hokage robes and hat, was enjoying a nice day. He was taking a break from his paperwork, which had diminished since Naruto had stopped his rampant pranks. He had missed seeing the boy every other day, but he did not miss the paperwork. I wonder how little Naruto-kun is doing. His thoughts were interrupted by the window being flung open and a flash of yellow appearing in front of him, only to vanish and reappear around the room. What is the meaning of this? He shouted from behind his desk. The yellow blur froze in place. Hiruzen sighed as he saw Naruto standing there with a sheepish smile and a hand behind his head. Naruto-kun, you are not in trouble again, are you? Naruto shook his head. Not this time, Gigi, he said. Hiruzen quirked an eyebrow at the obviously excited boy. I'm looking for Cat. You know, the Anbu with a cat mask and pretty purple hair. I know she is in here. Hiruzen chuckled at the boy. He had forgotten that today was the tracking test for the academy. He was proud that Naruto had figured it out. He was one of the 3 people to have ever figured out the hiding spot of the 5th Anbu. Well, Cat, it seems that you have been found. Naruto looked around before hearing the sound of clapping coming from a darkened corner. He looked to see Cat fade into existence. Very good, Naruto. You are the first person to find me since I began helping the academy administer the test. Congratulations. Yeah, I just need you to stamp this, Naruto said quickly, handing the Anbu the piece of paper. Quickly, I don't have much time. Cat chuckled as she took the piece of paper and put her stamp on it. Naruto vanished through the window as quickly as he came. I wonder if he knows he still has an hour left? She pondered, to the amusement of Sarutobi Hiruzen. But his reaction would not have been as amusing if he knew he shattered the old record, now would it? He quipped from behind his chair. No, I suppose it wouldn't, Cat answered the Hokage. That kid could make one hell of an Anbu one of these days. Naruto burst through the doors of the classroom, frantically waving his paper around for Iruka to see. I'm here, he shouted frantically. I'm not late, am I, Iruka-sensei? Iruka looked at the boy curiously before checking the clock. Nope, it seems you are an hour early, Naruto. Did you get enough to get an A? His eyes widened as he took the paper from the young Jinchuriki. He had all 5 stamps. Not only did I get an A, but I got all 5 stamps, he shouted with pride in his voice. What? No way. Sasuke grabbed the paper from Iruka to see all 5 stamps were obtained by the dead last. Where did you get this, Dobi? Wouldn't you like to know? Naruto said with a smirk on his face. Iruka just shook his head as the 2 boys went back and forth with each other. He would have to ask the Anbu how Naruto did it. It wasn't that he didn't believe Naruto, it's just that he shattered the old record by 30 minutes. Naruto was defiantly finding his own niche as a ninja, and he was damn proud of his student. Sasuke was again grinding his teeth. How could the Dobi do what he couldn't? It was unthinkable, and it irked him to no end. Naruto had made huge advancements this year while he felt like he stayed in the same place. He trained and trained and trained, yet still found himself not getting stronger, yet here was the Dobi improving immensely. It infuriated him to the core. Hinata walked in and sheepishly gave Iruka her piece of paper. Iruka looked down to see Hinata had gotten an A. She obtained 4 of the stamps. Well done, Hinata. Very good. Thank you, Iruka-sensei. I tried my best, she said with a small smile on her face while she looked away from the Chunin. Did I hear Iruka right, Hinata? Did you really get 4 stamps? Hinata blushed when she turned to Naruto and gave him a tentative nod. I told you, Hinata. I knew you could it, Naruto said enthusiastically. He was lost in his enthusiasm as leapt at the girl, giving her a massive hug. Naruto-kun is hugging me. What do I do? What do I do? Hinata thought frantically. She had turned a bright red. She breathed in, about to speak to him, before passing out in the blonde's arms. Naruto felt her go limp. Hinata? He looked to see the girl had passed out. He set her on a chair and shrugged his shoulders. Must have been tired from the testing. It was a lot of running around anyways. The rest of the hour went by fairly quickly as the rest of the students were beginning to file into the room. A lot had dejected faces, only turning in 2 stamps while others beamed with pride for collecting 3. Iruka raised an eyebrow as he saw that so far 4 students had turned in 4 or more stamps. Best results we have ever gotten on this test. Impressive. Alright, class time is up, Iruka announced, looking at the clock. Nice job by all. Your scores from the combined tests will be posted after the weekend. Please go ho. Iruka was interrupted as Kiba barged through the door. Iruka-sensei, here's my test, he shouted at the top of his lungs. Sorry Kiba, but the 5-hour time limit has already come and gone. I'm afraid that you get a 0 for the field test, Iruka said sadly, looking at the young Inuzuka. Kiba looked at the clock, then back at Iruka with a paled look on his face. But I was just a minute late, Iruka-sensei. Can't you make an exception just this once? I got 4 stamps. He showed his teacher his paper. Iruka grabbed the paper and saw that he had indeed gotten 4 stamps. That made it even tougher. I'm sorry Kiba, but when you become a ninja then you will be given restrictions on a mission. If you can't follow those restrictions then you put yourself, your teammates and the mission at risk. I'm sorry, but you need to learn this lesson now. You fail, Inuzuka Kiba. Kiba fell to his knees as Akamaru whimpered on the top of his head. He felt tears begin to well up in his eyes. He didn't mean to be late, he had been searching for Cat and lost track of time. He looked up when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked to see Naruto standing over him. He sniffed before brushing his hand off. What do you want, Naruto? He shouted at the blonde boy. Come to rub it in my face? Is it that it? He was surprised when Naruto shook his head. No, that wouldn't be right. I know how hard you worked and you deserve that, Akiba. I'm just over here trying to be a good friend. And who says we are friends? Why would I want to be friends with you? Kiba wasn't mad specifically at Naruto but more at the pity he was getting. It made him feel like a beta and not an alpha. He hated that feeling. Because we are gonna both be Konoha ninjas soon and that means we'll be comrades, Naruto answered as he stuck his hand out to Kiba. What do you say? Kiba looked at Naruto's hand and thought about his offer. He had a point. If the members of the pack fought it would only weaken them and potentially get them killed. He grabbed his hand, shook it strongly. Alright, but don't think I am gonna be losing you two again. You may have gotten me this time but next time you are going down, Uzumaki. Naruto beamed a smile at the wild-looking boy. You'll have to bring your best if you want to beat me. With that the two turned away and walked in their separate directions as friends and new rivals. Akamaru was sitting atop Kiba's head before he heard something. He turned back to see Ishiri sticking his head out of Naruto's backpack. The little fox stuck his tongue out at the ninkin before returning back to his place in Naruto's backpack. Akamaru sighed, he had lost again to that stinking fox. He really hoped the other ninkin never found out now. Ishiri yawned from his perch in a tree above the training ground of the academy. The last year at the academy had been rather dull for the two partners. Naruto was frustrated from all the theoretical strategy work done in the classroom and very rarely practiced. He would often struggle on paper tests but would breeze through the field tests. Still, it was the paper test and clone jutsu that kept him out of the top portion of his class, being labeled dobi, even by those that couldn't beat him in a spar. Ishiri, on the other hand, wished he could be in the classroom instead of outside, being left to his own devices. He had hit a growth spurt and now came up well past Naruto's knees. No longer being able to hide in Naruto's backpack, Ishiri found himself hanging out either at Naruto's apartment or transforming into a dog and trotting around near the academy. He had found himself in an awkward position one day when he drifted too close to the Inuzuka compound. An Inuzuka thought he was a stray and had given him a bath before letting him into the kennels where he came face to face with Akamaru. Ishiri and Akamaru sat staring at each other with confusion before he was summoned away by Naruto. To this day it was still the most awkward moment he had found himself in. Ishiri watched as his partner in crime failed time and again to form a remotely healthy-looking clone. He sighed when Naruto finally stopped. He can pre-form affinity jutsus just fine, but he can't form one stinking clone? What is going on? He waved it off when the class returned to the classroom, but the teacher stayed behind. His eyebrows rose a little as he leaned forward. What could they be having a conversation about this late in the year? Mizuki looked on with a smirk on his face. Naruto had again been unable to form even one viable clone. He had been frustrated. Naruto had improved massively over the past 2 years, to the point he was one of the top students in the class outside of paper tests and the basic clone jutsu taught at the academy. He was going through the preparations for the final test for the last year academy students when he came upon something that seemed to take his problems away. He waited for the students to head back into the classroom before getting Iruka's attention. "Iruka, can I talk to you about something?" he asked, motioning away from the door. Iruka looked at his contemporary and then back to his students. Satisfied that they would behave themselves, he walked over to his fellow teacher. "What can I do for you, Mizuki?" "Well, it is about Naruto," Mizuki began, pretending to be sorrowful. "You aren't thinking about passing him, are you?" "Why, yes, I am, Mizuki," Iruka answered. He looked at the academy teacher with suspicion. "He has proven to be a fine student and will one day make an excellent ninja. He has more than earned the right to graduate. But he hasn't been able to make a single clone." Mizuki growled internally when Iruka didn't pause or hesitate at his remark. This was going to be tougher than he thought. It is a part of the graduation requirements. The 3 tenets that the academy teach, genjutsu, ninjutsu and taijutsu, must be met for the applicant to pass. Naruto still has been unable to form one clone. It is on the test, and if he can't perform the jutsu, then we will have to fail him. Rock Lee passed last year's graduation exam, and so I will expect the Shinobi Council will not flinch at my request for Uzumaki Naruto to pass the exam. Iruka brushed off the challenge to his decision. There is precedent for the request and his improvement is well known, specifically by the Anbu who have remarked his tracking and stealth skills. You are right. Lee graduated, but you have to remember that he had the highest taijutsu scores in the last 30 years, Mizuki pointed out. With such a score and promise, the council couldn't possibly let a prodigy of that magnitude be stuck because of a technicality. Naruto has shown just as much promise due to his hard work and increased skill over the last 2 years, Iruka said with an annoyed tone in his voice. Mizuki had not put this much interest in the class the past 2 years. Something just didn't feel right. Well, that could be because he is your favorite, Mizuki muttered under his breath just loud enough for Iruka to hear. Come again? Mizuki internally smirked as he saw the look on Iruka's face. He had finally gotten what he wanted. Iruka was beginning to get rattled. You know as well as I do that the civilian council has some power over the academy. Many of the sitting elders on that council have kids in this class or previous classes. Many of those same kids won't pass for similar issues facing Naruto. Unlike Lee, they do not show the same promise as a ninja and so will fail. They will call foul if Naruto passes and their kids don't. They are already complaining about you favoring the boy. That is because of his situation, Iruka barked back. You know as well as I do that Naruto is hated by most of the civilians. The Shinobi Council will back my request. I think you are letting your feelings for the boy cloud your judgment, Iruka, Mizuki said as he gestured for the two to enter the building. I am sure that the council will see that and take it into consideration. Iruka looked at the door and then back to his friend with a worried look on his face. Perhaps you are right, Mizuki. Iruka walked in the academy with a downtrodden look. Mizuki could no longer hold the victorious smile from appearing on his face. He had finally sown the seeds of doubt into Iruka's mind. While he thought that Naruto would pass if Iruka's request was to come across the Shinobi Council's eyes with the backing of the Anbu commander, it would have to reach them first. Right now it looked like that may not even happen. Ishiri had to bite his tongue to stop the cry of disbelief that wanted to escape. How could this happen? Naruto has worked so hard, who cares if he hasn't mastered that jutsu, he deserves to graduate. If he fails, that will destroy him. I can't let that happen. Not caring to henge into a dog, he took off toward the Kitsune library and the elders. I have to tell Ka-chan. She'll know what to do. The Hokage would get multiple reports of a strange orange blur moving quickly through Konoha and into the forests from his ninja the next morning. What? Naruto cried out. That isn't fair. I deserve to graduate. Ishiri had just got done telling Naruto and the Kitsune elders about the conversation that had transpired between Mizuki and Iruka outside the academy. The others around also voiced their disbelief. They turned to Luna, looking for anything that could be done. Luna-sama, there has to be something we can do, Ari spoke. Is there any way we could help Naruto-chan? We can continue his training in ninjutsu, skip his tracking, genjutsu and taijutsu practices until he can get the ninjutsu down. Luna paused when she thought about something else. Naruto-chan, when is your exam? It's Friday, Luna-sama, Naruto answered. That gives us a week, Luna groaned. That isn't a lot of time considering the progress that you have made on the jutsu so far. Which is none, Bruno added in dryly. Precisely our problem, Luna responded. We could try even more extreme chakra control drills, Ari offered. Possibly, but that would most likely take too long, Luna brushed off the idea. We could work the boy to the ground, Bruno suggested. If the boy is run ragged, to the point of exhaustion, then maybe he could actually use the chakra needed, or rather not needed, for the jutsu. Naruto's eyes widened at the possibility of being put through the ringer by Bruno before Luna put down the idea. As tempting as that is, it is too risky. If we push the boy too much, he may be unable to walk and make it to his finals. The elders grew quiet while they tossed ideas around in their own minds as Naruto and Ishiri looked on. The duo had given up hope when Suzuki decided to speak up for the first time. We could put a minor suppression seal on the boy, the brown fox said half-heartedly. It would be an easy thing. Hide the seal under the boy's arm, covered by his clothes. The difficulty is finding the right seal to suppress his chakra just enough to preform the jutsu and not collapse from exhaustion. That would be cheating, Ishiri pointed out. If you ain't cheating, then you ain't trying, Bruno said with a smile. Suzuki finally has a good idea. It might take a while, but it is the most promising. But if you are caught cheating, then you get killed, or in Naruto's case failed, Luna said before shaking her head. No, that won't do either. There has to be something that'll work. Why are you underestimating me? The elders turned to see a red-faced Naruto. Naruto felt slighted. He felt like they were calling him the dobe like everyone else. It sounds like you guys don't believe me. I have done everything that you have given me. I have worked hard and look at what I have done. He motioned to the clearing where there were burn marks and downed trees from his jutsu practices. I am not some pathetic kid. I work hard and I can do this. Give me pointers in the right direction and I can do it, Datbayo. The elders looked around at each other, an unheard conversation passing between them, before Luna turned to Naruto. Alright Naruto, let's begin then, shall we? Naruto smiled before nodding his head vigorously. The group began to walk toward the training area of the clearing made by a few errant jutsus, all except for Yasu, who still looked like he was pondering something. He shrugged his shoulders and headed into the library inside the tree in the middle of the clearing. Even less chakra, Naruto-chan, Luna commanded. The rest of the others looked on as again Naruto failed to create a clone. They had tried a suppression seal to make him sense how much chakra was needed, only for the seal to short-circuit and leave a burn mark. Suzuki still looked embarrassed about the failure. They had tried to create multiple clones only for them to turn to a smoldering pile on the ground. They hadn't even made a sickly-looking Naruto. They had decided to try the brute force approach. Go until either Naruto got it down or he collapsed, then try again once he woke up. The night had long since overcome the daylight and plunged the clearing into darkness. The foxes had quickly made a few fires that lit the clearing enough to not bring attention to them but enough to see the results of the jutsu. Naruto huffed before going down to a knee. He felt every muscle of his body crying in pain, but he never backed down. Just a little more chakra. That is all I need, just a little more. As you wish, Kit. Before Naruto could answer the voice, he felt his body begin to burn. He grunted and bent over, dry heaving on the ground in front of him. Naruto, Ishiri yelled as he rushed to his friend's side. What's wrong, Na? Before Ishiri could finish, he was sent flying across the clearing. He hit a tree with thud before sliding to the ground unconscious. Naruto yelled in pain as his head shot up. His body was immediately enveloped in a red chakra cloak. The chakra pulsated and whipped around him furiously. He could feel energy coursing through his veins, more than he had ever experienced before. His whisker marks grew more pronounced along with enlarged nails accompanied by red eyes with black, vertical slits. Naruto-chan, you have to calm down, Ari yelled. The chakra was making her fur whip around madly. She kept her tail in front of her eyes to avoid the blinding light that came off from the whiskered boy. It's no use, Luna screamed, her voice barely heard over the roar of the chakra. That's the chakra of the Kyuubi no Yoko. He can't hear you. She began to panic. If this got out of hand, then Naruto could hurt himself or others. If things got truly out of handed, then the Kyuubi could escape. She looked to see Suzuki was still with them. Bruno, hold the boy down. Suzuki, use a seal to stop the flow of chakra. Won't that kill the boy? He questioned as he dug his claws into the ground so he wasn't thrown back. Trust me. Suzuki looked to Bruno, who gave him a nod. Bruno took off toward the Jinchuriki while Ari and Luna used water jutsu to cool their charge off. Suzuki's tail was whipping around his body wildly as he went through the needed seals for his fuinjutsu. Suddenly several scrolls of paper came shooting from his body and toward the uncontrollable chakra. Bruno, who had his fangs on the boy's shoulder and his claws in the ground, jumped out of the way as the paper encircled the boy. The paper encircled the boy before constricting him. The red chakra quickly dissipated. The foxes took a quick look at one another before tentatively taking a few steps toward the fallen boy. The scrolls began to burn off to reveal a gasping Naruto with several burn marks. This can't be, Suzuki muttered. All of that suppression paper and there is still chakra coming off the boy. The foxes took another look to see faint red lines of chakra still coming from the blonde. Summon Yuki now, Luna shouted. Tell her to bring 2 units, one for Ishiri and another for Naruto. Do it now. Luna ran over to her kid who was still on the ground. She heard a poof and turned to see a green fox standing in the clearing. The fox had a black cross on her chest that matched her paws and the tips of her ears. The vixen took a look around before gasping and dashing over to the unconscious fox. What happened to Ishiri? She took a better look around to see the area had still burning trees and gashes that burned on the ground. What the hell happened? It is of no concern. Ishiri got knocked out. Summon a unit for him, Luna said as she bent down and licked the fox on the head. I need you to take a look at Naruto. The summoner? What happened to him? She asked before trotting over to the boy. Her eyes widened as she saw the condition the boy was in. Those are bad burn. It looks like there are gashes across his body. Seem to be made from chakra. Were the 2 in a spar? That is above your head. Like hell it is, Yuki shouted. He is my patient and if I am to do anything I need to know what the hell happened. He released an immense amount of chakra. Too much for his body, Luna muttered. Leave it at that. She growled to accent her point. Hi Luna-sama, Yuki stated. She hit her tail on the ground and summoned 10 different foxes of various colors. In the lead was a vixen around the size of Ishiri. She was a lighter green and had white where Yuki had black. The big difference was that she had a white heart on her chest where Yuki had a black cross. The vixen took a look around before shrieking. Ishiri-kun, she yelled as she dashed over to him. Ishiri-kun, wake up. She gently nudged the fox to get no response. Satsuri, that is enough, Yuki commanded. He has been knocked out. Take your unit and attend to him. The rest of you are with me. The foxes nodded before dashing off to their assigned spots. Yuki-san, when those 2 are stabilized, get them into the tree and get them comfy. As quickly as you can would be best, Luna stated before making her way to the library. Ari, Bruno, and Suzuki with me. Hi, responded the foxes. Luna sighed as she stumbled into the library exhausted. She was followed by the 3 elders who had witnessed the incident. They made their way to their seats in the middle of the library before turning on a light above them to illuminate the room. The elders were silent before Suzuki finally spoke up. It seems that the Kitsune clan has come full circle and find ourselves with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. A different circumstance this time, Bruno said quietly. He looked over to his friend and frowned. He couldn't imagine the pain she was feeling at the moment. Is it possible? I mean, he could be her. It is of no importance, Luna responded deadpanned. But you missed her so much when Ari was cut off by a growl from the vixen. That is enough, Luna barked. She did not want to talk about this right now. We have more pressing issues at the moment. We pushed Naruto-chan too hard. We could have really done damage to him. The Kyuubi's chakra is nothing to take lightly. How will we go about him being our summoner? Ari questioned. Like we always do. We treat him like all his predecessors before him, Luna said. She now knew why he had been shunned from his village. Jinchurikis were not a popular group. He needs us now more than ever. If he finds out what happened and who is sealed in him, then he will need a family. He will need his clan. He needs us. Should we tell him? He deserves to know, Ari pointed out. I agree. The boy should know why he has been ostracized by the people of his village, Bruno announced. Agreed. Suzuki nodded. No, that is the last thing we will do. Luna ignored the cries of disagreement that came from the group. If he finds out about why he has been treated the way he has, without an explanation from his village, then he will likely flee, becoming a missing nin. If that happens, then he can have no peaceful life. He will find no love, only hardship as they hunt for their lost Jinchuriki. They would rather kill him than let him slip into the hands of the other villages. No, he needs to be told by someone from the village, someone who can explain to him what happened and why. Bruno scoffed at the suggestion. The boy has been kept in the dark. His entire life he has been lied to, treated worse than trash. He deserves happiness, but he will not find it in that Kami-forsaken village. They don't deserve someone of his talent. Or his pure heart. Ari finished where Bruno left off. He deserves love. I agree that he may not find it there, but he can't leave. Luna-sama is right. He can't become a missing nin. Maybe he will find a kunoichi from another village during a mission or something, but he can't become a missing nin. There is no happiness in that life. Then we will be there for him. Whenever he is sad, we will be there. Ishiri has done a good job. Their bond is strong, but he still needs a family, Luna explained. Any arguments? No, was heard from the collective group. As the group answered, they heard a noise coming from the door. They turned to see a stretcher being carried by two foxes, one on either side, bring Ishiri into the room, quickly followed by Naruto's own stretcher. The boys were taken past the elders, who looked on with sad expressions, and placed onto the ground gently. Luna-sama, they are both in stable condition. Luna turned to see Yuki standing alert. Naruto is worse off. He will need to rest up for at least a week. Ishiri on the other hand should be up and walking in 2 or 3 days. Luna looked over to Naruto, who was bandaged up and sleeping. Her eyes danced over to Ishiri. Satsuri was curled up next to him, a concerned look plastered on her face. Luna sighed before turning back to the green vixen. Well done, Yuki. As long as someone is here to check up on them, then you are dismissed for tonight. With a nod, Yuki trotted over to her underlings and dismissed them, choosing to stay. After a bit, Yuki reluctantly let Satsuri stay and attend to Ishiri's wounds. We will have the Yin-Yang brothers set up a perimeter and keep away any unwanted visitors, Luna stated. We will set up a genjutsu so we can look after Naruto. I am sure that Spike and Chakra would have drawn red flags. Patrols have probably been sent out to look for him. What in the world happened? The elders turned to see Yasu walking up from a corner of the room with a scroll held by his tail. If you had been outside, and not catching up on some reading, then you would have seen Naruto release the Kyuubi's chakra. Bruno spat at the small orange fox. Our summoner is a Jinchuriki? Yasu questioned with a surprised look in his eyes. This won't change anything, will it? I was rather excited to teach the boy myself. We will discuss that later, Yasu, Luna said with a slightly angry look in her eyes. First you will tell us where you were while we trained our summoner. Ah yes, quite right, Yasu said as he set the scroll down in front of him. I think I may have found a way around that little jutsu that is bothering Naruto for some time. We have been over this, Yasu. We can't cheat for the boy, Bruno said, exacerbated. Well, what if he learned a different clone jutsu? Yasu offered. As long as he learns another clone jutsu, then that should pass him. Wouldn't it? But we can't simply give him an elemental clone, Ari pointed out. If he comes into the test with a water clone or mud clone, then they will ask questions like how he got it. He wouldn't be able to explain his new jutsu without telling them about us. Isn't that what we have tried to avoid? Yes, it is. But what if we gave him a second clone technique that was developed in Konoha? Yasu proposed. Go on, Luna said, very intrigued by this new turn of events. Well, it seems Senju Tobarama, the Nidaime Hokage, was quite an ingenious fellow, Yasu said as he spread the scroll out. Have you ever heard of the Shadow Clone Jutsu? Sarutobi Hiruzen hadn't enjoyed a peaceful night's sleep in ages. He had finished paperwork early, gotten through council meetings without a hitch and had a nice dinner with his family. It had been a perfect night, made only more so by quickly drifting off to sleep. His dreams were short-lived when he felt a spike of menacing chakra. A feeling he could never forget in all his life. He shot up from his bed and immediately grabbed the nearest kunai. As quickly as the spike of chakra came, it just as quickly vanished, but there was still a faint signal. Almost immediately there was an Anbu member in the room. Hokage-sama. The Anbu could get out no further words before Hiruzen was up and dressed. Yes, Boar, I felt it too. He quickly made his way out the door into his office. Have Alpha, Beta and Delta squads check the forests. Send Omega and Gamma to check for any detections in the barrier that could have been missed. All other Anbu are to secure the village. Go. Boar nodded before vanishing. This is not how he wanted to start his day. He looked up at the crescent moon above, an ache in his aged heart appearing. Kami, forgive me if I have missed my chance to tell him the truth. Minato, Kushina, watch over the boy. Hiruzen sat at his desk a few hours later expecting his Anbu to return with the boy in tow. To his surprise and dread, Kat showed up by herself. No Naruto and no other Anbu members. He feared the worst. Report Kat, Hiruzen said calmly. He hasn't been found, sir, Kat said hesitantly. Hiruzen grimaced before responding. Any traces or leads found? Any detections in the barrier? That is the thing, sir. All traces of the Kyuubi's chakra have vanished. Kat gulped internally as she saw the disapproving look of her superior. She didn't blame him. They were supposed to be the best and they had come up empty. The signature vanished in a clearing, but there was neither an entry or exist point from the spot of the signature. The barrier surrounding the village is solid. No breaches were recorded and all patrols have come back negative for intruders. Has the village been secured, Kat? Hiruzen hoped for at least some good news from the Anbu member. Hi Hokage-sama, Kat responded quickly. All Anbu, not currently looking for Uzumaki Naruto, are currently holding their positions at important junctions and entry points of the village. Have you checked the Yondaime's head, sir? Kat couldn't understand where the question came from. The Yondaime's head, have you checked it? Hiruzen repeated the question with a far-off look in his eyes. Sir, I believe Alpha Team was charged with that area. They reported nothing. Kat paused before thinking about the specific nature of the question. Hokage-sama, if I may, why would you have us check specifically the Yondaime's head? It is Naruto-kun's favorite place when he is sad, Hiruzen answered simply. What an appropriate and ironic place for him. Naruto's eyes fluttered open only to close immediately. His eyes were still sensitive. He tried to move only to feel a searing pain across his body. The sensation quickly dissipated as a wave of relief washed over him. Easy Kit, the harsh voice said from seemingly nowhere, your body is still recovering. What the hell happened? Naruto could feel a massive headache treating his temple like a drum. He could feel a hint of nausea come over him before a second wave of relief washed over him. You couldn't handle my gift, the gift said with a chuckle. Still too weak, little human, but I suppose that is to be expected from a kid of your young age. Naruto could hear the smirk the owner of the voice had on, as it seemed to reverberate through him. What gift was that? 1 second I am exhausted and the next I am on fire. I gave you chakra. Very powerful chakra, the voice said nonchalantly. You are still too young to receive the full dose. We will work on it. We? Yes. I gave you the chakra so you could learn that damnable jutsu. Why would you help me? Naruto thought as he began to feel the pain fade away and his body return to normal. Because there are people who will take advantage of you if you don't graduate. They will use your failure to either ensure you never reach your full potential or that you become a pawn, easily moved and thrown away as they please, the voice said with venom coursing through his tone. How do you now? Naruto tried to sit up but his muscles still ached a bit. He decided to sit back down and lay there until he could sit up. That is human nature, specifically for one of your stature and situation. My situation? Like the Kitsune contract? Naruto narrowed his eyes at the thought. Why would people use him because of the contract? As important as the contract is, there is more urgent matters, the voice said as he seemed to fade. But that is a conversation for another day. Hopefully next time we talk it will be face to face. Naruto shivered at the sound of the voice. Before he could question what he meant, he felt the voice vanish. Naruto went to try and sit up. He felt relieved when he no longer hurt, The searing pain in his body vanished and the small aches were nothing new to him after training with Bruno and the Yin-Yang brothers. Naruto sat up and began to look around. He rubbed his shoulder to loosen it up before his eyes caught the sleeping form of Ishiri bandaged up and lying on a makeshift bed. "Ishiri," Naruto said before grunting and grabbing his arm. "Damn it. Ishiri, wake up. What happened?" He got no movement from his partner. His eyes grew sad before seeing slight movement on the other side of the orange fox. With a yawn, a young, green vixen stretched and stood up. The fox smacked her lips together before peering over to Naruto with sleepy eyes. Her eyes immediately widened when she saw the blonde boy was awake. "You shouldn't be awake," she said with a sweet voice that sounded like birds softly chirping. "Yuki-sama said you'd be out cold for a week." "A week?" Satsuri jumped at the excited boy. She looked on with slight curiosity at the struggling Naruto. She shook her head before putting a paw on the boy's chest and gently easing him back onto the bed. "But I have to get up and go to my final exam. If I miss it I will fail, then be stuck at the academy for another year." "You have only been out for 2 days, Naruto-sama," she said sweetly. "It is late at night on Sunday, your exam isn't until Friday." "How do you know my name?" Naruto asked, puzzled by the light green fox in front of him. "Oh yeah, I am sorry," Satsuri said with a slight bow. "My name is Satsuri of the medical unit of the Kitsune. It is a pleasure to meet you, summoner." "It is an honor." That didn't answer anything. "Satsuri?" Satsuri nodded her head with a slight smile on her face at the recognition. "How do you know my name? What happened to Ishiri?" "Oh, all the Kitsune have heard about you, Naruto-sama," she said happily. "You are the talk of the den. They say you have true potential. It is seen as the highest honor to be summoned by you, even more if you actually know our names." Satsuri saw that Naruto had stopped paying attention to her and followed his vision to the figure of Ishiri. "I see you're worried about Ishiri-kun." She smiled sadly when she saw sadness in Naruto's eyes as he nodded. "He was knocked out Friday night by whatever happened. He is stable and should be waking up within the next day." Naruto felt a pang of guilt at the knowledge he had hurt his friend, but it was made slightly better by the knowledge he'd be okay. What about Luna-sama and the rest of the elders? If he had done that to Ishiri, then he couldn't imagine how the rest of them looked. A look of realization crossed the vixen's eyes. "Oh dear, I forgot," she cried out. "They told me to wake them if either of you were to wake up. They won't be happy about this." Naruto looked on with curiosity as the young fox pranced behind one of the chairs before a grunt and yip was heard. This was quickly followed by the sounds of falling bodies, crashes and obscenities. Shortly afterwards the elders stumbled into view of the blonde-haired boy. No one ever said the foxes were morning creatures. Luna's drowsy disposition quickly changed when she saw Naruto was awake. "Naruto-chan, you're awake?" The other elders quickly woke up as well. They looked at the boy with awe. Ari tentatively walked up to him and took a sniff before sitting on her haunches with a beaming smile on her face. "Well, good morning, Naruto-chan. How are you?" Her voice was sing-song-esque. Naruto laughed as he put his head behind his head. "I'm alright, Ari-sensei. A little sore. We should get Yuki-san in here to run her own examination," Yasu pointed out. "We need to know how he actually is, not just how he feels." Naruto looked on as a darker green fox appeared in smoke. She looked over him with a skeptical eye. Before Naruto could speak, her tail was brushing him, glowing the entire time. The tail stopped after a few passes over the boy. Yuki stepped back and shook her head in astonishment. "He is perfectly fine. His muscles are sore but no more than he usually would be after a tough workout." She paused and thought about something before continuing. "I would suggest he rest for a few days. His tenketsu and chakra pathways are very strained. That is to be expected with a burst of chakra like the burns indicated he had." Naruto was about to ask a question but was interrupted by a groan. He looked over to see Ishiri begin to move. Satsuri yelped as she rushed over to his side. She had her tail under his head to help him up to a position where he was seated up. Naruto pushed himself back onto his feet and staggered over to his friend, Luna by his side as he walked to his partner. Naruto fell back onto his butt as he scratched him behind the ear. "I'm sorry, Ishiri. This is all my fault." Ishiri looked at him and shook his head. "I was just checking up on my partner. So I got hurt because I wanted to see if my friend was okay. It will always be worth it. You're my partner and I wouldn't change it for the world." Naruto looked down at his friend with a tear in his eye. Ishiri had truly become his best friend. He promised himself that Ishiri wouldn't be hurt like that again. He would protect his partner and the rest of the Kitsune clan. They were his family. Yuki-san has said that you can continue your training again on Wednesday, Naruto-chan, Luna said as she looked at the two companions. That goes for you too, Ishiri. You two will stay here and recover. You will be guarded around the clock with the Yin-Yang brothers and a medical unit. Satsuri-san has requested to be here the entire time. The boys looked over at the nervously smiling Vixen. Once you two are ready, will we continue your preparations for the academy exam? But Luna-sama, what about classes? Naruto asked. Haven't you done your written test already? Naruto simply nodded at the question. Then if I am not mistaken, the rest of this week is just preparations for the field test, something you can do here while you are recovering. Yeah, we are finally going to get that clone jutsu down. Ishiri nudged his partner with a smile on his face. We've got this. You bet we do dat Bayo, Naruto said, giving Ishiri a nudge of his own. Oh, you won't be learning that jutsu, Naruto. The boys looked up to the smallest of the elders. What do you mean, Yasu-sensei? Naruto asked. Have you ever heard of the shadow clone jutsu, my boy? The academy was buzzing with excitement. Today was the final days of the examinations. Everything was on the line for the students. The test had consisted of a written exam the previous week along with tests like kunai and shuriken throwing. Today was the biggest day though. To pass, they would have to show they had mastered the 3 academy jutsus. Students were either pacing with nerves, jumping with joy with a shiny new Hite 8, while others lamented in failure, hoping that next year they could pass. It would be their last chance. Wahoo! Hinata, check this out. Hinata turned to see an excited Inuzuka Kiba with a new Hite 8 shinnying proudly on his forehead. Akamaru was barking happily on his head. Maybe we are gonna be teammates. Wouldn't that be awesome? By the way, your Hite 8 looks really cool. Aw, thank you, Kiba-kun, Hinata said, half distracted. Her eyes were wandering the academy grounds looking for a flash of yellow. She grew excited before frowning. It was Yamanaka Ino who was swooning over Sasuke as Sakura was off taking her test. As the time went on, she began to worry even more. Each day that week she would shown up at the academy even though she didn't need to. She made the excuse she was practicing, but in truth she wanted to hang out with Naruto. She was hoping to use training as an excuse but was disappointed when he never showed up, leaving her with Kiba. She heard Naruto's name called and felt her heart clench. He still hadn't shown up. Where is he? If he doesn't graduate, then we can't be on the same team. As she had begun to give up hope, she heard a voice ring through the trees. I'm here, Iruka-sensei. She turned and slightly gasped. Naruto came bounding into the training grounds with a new outfit she had never seen before. Naruto was wearing black shinobi sandals which were taped at the ankles. He wore black pants with a black, long-sleeve, tight undershirt. On top of that he wore a burnt orange shirt that had a loose turtleneck-style neck with a zipper. On the back was a black whirlpool. The shirt hung a little loose on him, but Hinata thought he looked great. Hinata blushed as Naruto ran past her. She cursed herself for being unable to talk to him again. She stayed there, looking at the door to the academy, with her hands clasped in front of her. She wanted Kami to be on her side for once. Iruka sighed in relief when she saw Naruto appear in front of him. Good of you to join us, Naruto, Iruka chided the blonde boy. Where have you been? Naruto laughed as he put a hand behind his head. Sorry, Iruka-sensei. I have been training like crazy for this test. I am gonna pass dat Bayo. Well then let's get to it then, Iruka said with smile. He escorted the whiskered boy to their classroom where Mizuki was sitting behind a table looking over various papers and test results. Ah, Naruto, you finally show up, Mizuki said as he eyed the boy. He had been nervous when Naruto hadn't shown up the past week. He needed him to be there for his test for his plan to work. He was so close. He could already imagine the jutsu he would learn from the Scroll of Seals. Yeah, sorry about that, Mizuki-sensei, Naruto said with an apologetic smile. Enough, Naruto, Iruka said with a suddenly serious face. You are our last candidate for graduation. You will need to show you have mastered the 3 jutsus. Naruto nodded with a smile that beamed from ear to ear. He went on to show the first 2 needed jutsus with ease. They had become second nature to him. He took a deep breath before bringing 2 fingers up from each hand into a cross in front of him. Shadow clone jutsu, he yelled before the entire room was filled with smoke. It quickly dissipated to show 10 clones, plus the original, standing in front of the proctors. I told you I could do it, Iruka-sensei, the group of blondes said all at once. Both Chunins had their jaws on the floor. Iruka shook off the astonishment first. He shook his head and looked at the boy with surprise. Naruto, where did you learn this jutsu? This time try imagining solid clones, Naruto, Yasu said with his muzzle in the scroll. It says here to mold your chakra into clones by imagining solid copies of yourself while putting in large amounts of chakra into the images. This should be easier for you, Naruto-chan, Ari pointed out. With the last technique you were having to use too little chakra. You need a lot for this one. That is easier said than done, Naruto said through gasps. He was still sore from the incident even though it was Thursday. His chakra network was still strained, so they had decided that for every hour he was training he would take 2 off. I'm trying over here. One more time, Naruto, Ishiri encouraged from his side. You almost had it last time. Maybe picture more clones this time instead of 1. Okay, Ishiri, Naruto said with a wave. I'll try it. He took a breath before crossing his fingers and yelling at the top of his lungs. Shadow clone jutsu. The clearing was enveloped in a cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, Naruto was looking at multiple copies of himself. Dat Bayo. I did it. Graduation here I come. Ishiri snuck up to one of the clones that were enthusiastically celebrating with another one. He took a sniff to see if they smelled the same. Seeing that the clone had no smell, he decided to test to see if they were as solid as the scroll said they would be. He took his tail, which was beginning to burn with a basic fire jutsu for the foxes. He brought up his tail back before swinging it at the clone, whose eyes widened at the attack. The clone popped into a puff of smoke. Hey Ishiri, what is the big idea? Ishiri took a look toward the original, who seemed to be mad. I just made that clone. Why did you destroy it? How do you know I did it? Ishiri asked, confused. He was sure the original had his back turned to him. Because I saw you attacking me, well, not me, but the clone, and then suddenly, poof, I was gone. Or was it the clone? Naruto was all of the sudden very confused. How did he know Ishiri did it? Yasu, Luna said with a snarl in her voice. What is going on? Ah well, yes, that is very peculiar, Yasu said as he rolled the scroll further down. Yes, here it is. It seems that Senju Tobarama didn't create this jutsu just for show. It seems that he created it during the time before the villages were established as a way to preform reconnaissance. It seems the clones are able to pass their memories and experiences over to the original as well as preformed jutsus. The rest of the group looked stunned at the new development. The jutsu was really a one-of-a-kind jutsu. Their astonishment was quickly undone by a yelp. What the hell? Bruno said as he looked behind him to see a Naruto clone holding his tail. Why, you little gaki? Bruno pulled his tail from his clone's hands before ramming him with a headbutt. The clone popped out of existence. Naruto, why the hell did you have the clone do that? Naruto paled as he saw the large fox walk menacingly his way. He put his hands in front of him, waving frantically. It wasn't me, I swear. I promise. Yasu. Bruno barked. Yes, it seems there is a warning here, Yasu pointed out with a sheepish look on his face. And that is? Luna asked more calmly than Bruno. It says here that if a clone isn't given a strict commands, then it is possible that it will act as if it had a mind of its own. Yasu looked up from the scroll. Seems a rather mild warning, isn't? Tell that to my tail, Bruno growled. It also says that it is a forbidden jutsu of Konoha, Yasu said nonchalantly, looking back through the scroll. Yasu. The group yelled at him in unison. How is Naruto-chan going to explain to his instructors that an academy student suddenly learns a forbidden jutsu when he can't even figure out the watered-down version? Ari ranted. Yes, it seems you overlooked that little part, my old friend, Suzuki pointed out. Well, this time I didn't overlook anything, Yasu said with a smirk on his face. It says here that elite Jonin and Anbu learned this technique. If Naruto were to say that he saw an Anbu practicing this technique, then I am sure that it will be believed by whoever is proctoring his test. Luna looked skeptical, but they really had no choice but to trust the smaller fox. Well, it seems we have no other choice. It will have to be made believable. The Yin-Yang brothers will help Naruto-chan with the lie. While I was training really hard to get the clone jutsu right, Naruto began the tale. I was in a training ground outside of Konoha when I heard a noise. I went to see what it was to see two Anbu sparring, and this was a jutsu that was often used. I watched, and since the hand sign was so simple I was able to copy it. Mizuki was writhing in disbelief. How did he copy a forbidden jutsu? That is impossible. I have to say something before this can continue. Mizuki cleared his throat, garnering the attention of the other two in the room. That is fine and dandy, Naruto, but that is not the clone jutsu taught by the academy. I am sorry to tell you that you have failed your test. Naruto looked destroyed. He looked to Iruka, who had a smile plastered on her face. That is not the case, Mizuki. The other two looked at Iruka with confusion. The clone jutsu is actually based off of Senju Tobirama's shadow clone jutsu. So Naruto learning the more advanced version, while unique and unprecedented, still qualifies as a passing grade on that jutsu. Iruka handed Mizuki the test and pointed to the area covering ninjutsu and to what was acceptable by the academy. Mizuki had to bite his tongue to contain a yell of disbelief. Naruto had actually passed. Mizuki was still staring at the test in disbelief while Iruka went to a box and stood in front of Naruto. Naruto, I am proud to say that you have graduated, he said as he presented his student his new Hite 8. Congratulations. Iruka laughed as Naruto bowed to his sensei before snatching the headband and quickly throwing it on. He was nearly jumping for joy. Naruto took off toward the door. Iruka walked along as Naruto ran into the courtyard to an awaiting Hinata. Hinata, Naruto shouted. She was the first one he saw and was actually the only other person still hanging around. Check this out, I actually passed. He pointed enthusiastically to his Hite 8. Congratulations, Naruto-kun, Hinata said with a small smile on her face and pink blush brushed on her cheeks. I knew you could it. Thanks, Hinata, Naruto said before noticing Hinata had her own Hite 8. Hey, and you passed too. Your Hite 8 looks awesome like that. Maybe we will be on the same team. Hinata unconsciously touched her Hite 8 that was tied around her neck. He actually likes it, and he wants to be on the same team? Hinata could feel her blush turn from pink to a deep red. I would like that too, Naruto-kun. Hey, I got a good idea, Hinata. How about we go to Ichiraku's to celebrate? He asked enthusiastically. Hinata felt her heart beating against her ribcage. He wants to get food together? Like a date? She opened her mouth to speak only for her whole world to go black as she passed out. Naruto saw her fall back but couldn't catch her in time. Hinata? He peered at her on the ground only to hear a faint chuckle from Iruka. It'll be alright, Naruto, he said as he picked the girl up. I'll get a kunoichi to take her back to the Hyuga compound. She'll wake up soon. I would be more than happy to go with you though, Naruto. He smiled as he saw the blonde boy nod enthusiastically. I need to go make a quick errand, but I will meet you there, Naruto. And I'm buying. Alright, see you there, Iruka-sensei Datbeo, Naruto shouted before sprinting off to his favorite food stand. Iruka walked through the halls of the Hokage's tower. He walked past the secretary without a pause. He opened the door to a haze of smoke. Sitting behind his desk, reading over reports, was Sarutobi Hiruzen. Hiruzen looked up to see Iruka standing in the opening. Hiruzen put the reports down and pulled out his pipe. Ah, Iruka, he began with an air of wisdom. The examinations must be over. Tell me, was Uzumaki Naruto there? Hi, Hokage-sama. Made it just in time, Iruka said with a smile. By the way you are smiling, I assume that he passed. When Hiruzen got a nod of affirmation, he took a breath. Good. He had me worried for a bit. It will be interesting to see on what team we can place him. Hitaki Kakashi has specifically requested him, but the civilian council wishes him to head the team with Uchiha Sasuke. I suppose a tracking team with those two in Hyuga Hinata would be a good fit, but then there is Yuhi Kurenai who specifically asked for the Hyuga to be under her. A fine dance this will turn out to be. Hiruzen chuckled before taking another puff from his pipe. Hokage-sama, that is one of the reasons that I came to you today, Iruka spoke up. Oh, and what would that be, Iruka-kun? Well sir, there were 28 graduates. Iruka saw a look of concern cross the Hokage's features before he took another draw and exhaling a plume of smoke. That does pose a very interesting problem. Iruka took out a scroll from his desk and looked through it. After a bit he rolled it back up and set it aside. Tell me, Iruka, what would you do? You know these students the best. Well, that is the thing, sir. This is a tricky situation, Iruka pointed out. On one side the number means that someone will have to wait a year unless there is an opening on an older team, but that is rarely done. Which leaves an apprenticeship. Here is finished for the Chunin. Yes, a very delicate situation. Any candidates that could possibly be viable for such a thing? Just two, Iruka said slowly. Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto. Interesting choices. Hiruzen pondered the idea. Sasuke would be a good apprentice to Kakashi for the Sharingan and Naruto to someone from the Anbu for his tracking skills. Tell me, Iruka, which one needs a team the most? Well, they both do for similar reasons. Sasuke is a very brooding individual. A team may be able to heal some wounds that have built up after the events with Itachi. Iruka thought about the next choice before carrying on. Naruto doesn't have many friends. Maybe a few that will hang out with him every now and then, but not a true friend his age. A team will be able to provide him a scenario where he can learn and develop his relationship and personal skills that an apprenticeship will be unable to provide. Unless he were to be put into a place where he would be with a larger group. An Anbu squad or the like may do that, Hiruzen pointed. But even then it is unlikely he will branch out from there. Yet there is more to it than that. How so, Hokage-sama? The civilian council is determined to have some sort of pull on the young Uchiha. Before Iruka could ask his question, the Hokage voiced his own inquiry. Tell me what you know about Haruno Sakura. She is below average on pretty much all physical activities varying from taijutsu to kunai throwing. She is very bright though, excelling in all theoretical work. She has excellent chakra control which shows promise in either genjutsu or medical judas, Iruka explained. Why do you ask, Hokage-sama? Because Sakura's mother is on the civilian council and has specifically requested for her daughter to be put on a team with Sasuke. What type of team were you thinking about, Hokage-sama? Iruka asked. A genjutsu specialized team. Hiruzen raised his hand to stop the argument from Iruka. Yes, I know that Kurenai would be the best fit for the group, but it is necessary for Sasuke to receive training for his Sharingan, which promises a lot in the field of genjutsu, and the only man for that job is Kakashi. Sadly, he is a ninjutsu expert, but I will make it a point to cross-train teams so their pupils are not hearing a single voice for the next few years of their lives. Well, there is another male student that could possibly fit that team composition, Iruka said as he narrowed his eyes, thinking through his options. Good, Hiruzen said as pulled another puff from his pipe while leaning back in his chair. That just leaves young Naruto-kun. What were you thinking, Hokage-sama? I have an ideal sensei for the boy, but he is nowhere to be found, Hiruzen said, shaking the scroll he had previously been reading. It's a shame really. He would have enjoyed the challenge. May I suggest something, sir? Hiruzen looked at his subordinate with extra curiosity. Iruka was always polite to him, and everyone, but he was never hesitant. This was very interesting. Yes, Iruka? I think I have the perfect sensei for Naruto. A figure jumped through the shadows of street corners and tree lines, expertly escaping the light of the full moon above and the street lamps that bathed the area. The figure pressed its body to the wall as a patrol crossed its path. The patrol, walking mere inches away from its position, saw nothing. Kneeling next to a door that would lead into the record department of the village, the figure pulled out small tools. After silently jiggling and working the locks, a faint click was heard. A silent fist pump was the figure's only celebration. The door opened and the figure stepped inside to a faint light of the hallway. The figure stepped into the light to reveal purple hair done up in a small ponytail that stuck up into the air. This messy hairstyle was accompanied by a light brown trench coat that went well with her chocolate-colored eyes. Underneath the trench coat she wore a fishnets that covered her upper body and thighs with a tan skirt. She wore the sandals and shin guards of the Anbu. To finish off her outfit is a snake fang pendant around her neck and a Konoha Hite 8 on her forehead. She walked down the sides of the hall, ducking to avoid any windows, before coming to her target. Again she took out her tools and unlocked the door of interest. Inside the door was a bland room. Along the four walls were filing cabinets that were marked with various names of hidden villages on the continent and some beyond. There was a single desk with a chair and lamp in the middle. The room was in pitch blackness as she closed the door but was quickly illuminated by a small flashlight she carried. Quickly making her way to Konoha's cabinet, she again fiddled with the lock. This time she made sure to check for booby traps. She smirked as she disabled the various safety measures. Satisfied that she had successfully unlocked the cabinet, she began her search. They had to have more files of that bastard than they gave the Hokage. She thought as she went through the files. These bastards in Kagi no Kuni and Jomi no Sato always keep extremely sensitive information to use as extra bartering tools. She continued her search before coming across something. With a victorious smirk, she took the file from the cabinet and began to look at the papers it held. Now this is what I am talking about. Orochimaru will finally pay for his crimes. A small, but bright, light quickly diverted her victorious thoughts. She turned and peered into the cabinet to see an explosive tag that was hidden under the folder was burning. Shit.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.